There's something special about nostalgia. It has the ability to blind even the most pragmatic and objective individuals. It resides deep in all of our judgments and causes us to argue for hours about why our memories are better than yours. Nostalgia bias was definitely not a concept created because of gaming, but I have to imagine it prevails in gaming more than most other mediums. Or maybe that's just my arbitrary experience. Now granted, I feel like everywhere I turn, nostalgia bias exists. It always seems like no matter who I speak to, the movies of yesterday were always better than today's movies. The music of yesterday is always better than today's music. Heck, even in the corporate world, employees just aren't what they used to be. It's such a bizarre thought because those same individuals arguing these points had the generations prior to them making the very same claims. Actually, now that I'm slowly creeping up in age and I'm on the other side of it, I've noticed younger demographics already arguing as to why their current age, the one they're realistically developing their future nostalgia biases for, is miles better than whatever I had experienced as a child. I don't know what it is about humans that makes them obsess over their own experiences being the best. Almost as if they need some form of self-validation that they lived in a unique timeline that nobody else has experienced. It's strange. I have to imagine we notice it significantly more today than days past since so many people have platforms to share their thoughts and opinions, and that likely leads to more conversations between people a decade or more apart in age. I wonder if without internet, we would just accept that anyone older than us might be right and did indeed have way more fun than we did. I'm not sure. But I gotta imagine being able to have all of your thoughts, beliefs, likes and dislikes validated by a wide range of people all over the world definitely skews our opinions and develops confidence in our thoughts. Actually, I don't need to imagine it. I already see it everywhere I turn. I want you to think about the first video game you absolutely loved. Not necessarily the first one you played, but the one that you have the fondest memories of as a child that you can't quite imagine replicating that type of experience. That experience is unique to you. I mean, heck, I have fond experiences and nostalgia for straight up terrible games just because of the time of my life that I played them. I have nostalgia for changes in console generations. 2020 wasn't even that long ago, and I think back to the consoles releasing during COVID and the chip shortages and the scalpers and how for a brief moment in time we all had to stop and huddle very close to our loved ones. But we persevered and we moved on. I remember being on forums and camping out when the Wii launched and what it was like to see it in person for the first time. The cultural phenomena of Wii Sports was unlike anything I had ever experienced, and I'm not sure if I'll ever experience that again. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is that I don't think nostalgia is only about the game. It's about the experience. And some experiences are more unique than others. There's a whole generation, or heck, maybe 2 or 3 generations of Fortnite and Minecraft enjoyers that will be singing about how it took over the industry for longer than anyone could imagine. But there's also a subset of kids that will argue about the specific indie game they played and how it made them fall in love with a specific genre. The point is that some of these moments stand out more than others. I don't think I really need to highlight that Mario 64 is such a nostalgia-heavy game. I'm not going to make a light bulb go off and suddenly have you nod along and discover something you already didn't know. But I will argue that Mario 64 is unique in that regard for a variety of reasons. Many of which are pretty clear-cut, and likely have already been vocalized, but I still think it's worth going through. Primarily because A, Mario 64 is basically my favorite game of all time, and I've put off discussing it long enough. And B, Mario 64 is one of the most famous games ever, so naturally, even though we've all seen hundreds of videos on the subject, we'll watch 100 more. When the game released, I was young. Like, we're talking first grade. I had grown up primarily with an SNES. I didn't know what Super Mario World was because for me, it was just called Mario. Every day I'd be excited to play Mario. So imagine my surprise when I was with the family walking around Toys R Us and we passed by an old Philips Magnavox TV with some older kids standing in front of it playing what I now know is called Whomp's Fortress. I remember seeing the way the coins floated atop the water, the way the water reacted as Mario ran through it. It was like a fever dream. I hadn't seen anything in 3D before. I didn't even know what a Nintendo 64 was, nor did I know that we were about to buy it. It came with a controller with 3 prongs. I remember thinking that was the coolest thing in the world. Like, obviously it had 3 prongs. It was next gen. Duh. Messing around with the joystick, I didn't know the difference between digital and analog controls, but I knew that the harder I pressed the joystick, the faster Mario ran. And likewise, when I pressed it lightly, I could even make him walk. I remember dying of laughter with my brothers and sisters when we saw Mario crawl like a baby, and being amazed at the fact that he could talk while he was dreaming. I mean, goodness, I don't know why I'm even jumping so far ahead. I remember the hours we spent just on the title screen, messing around with his floating head with all of its intricate details and varying points that you can grab onto, seeing who could make the funniest face and just having a laugh about it. These are all my genuine memories of the game. The things I still remember so fondly as if it was a point in time that I could touch with my bare hands. But I think something special and unique about this experience is that it's not just my own. Mario 64 is part of a unique subset of games where almost everybody has the same general nostalgia for. We all associated this with not only the leap to the next gen, but also a leap into another dimension. I'd wager the memories I just shared about Mario running around Whomp's fortress and playing with his face in the title screen is not even that unique. Most of you probably heard me talking and remembered a younger version of yourself experiencing the exact same thing. It's what makes this game so special. It wasn't just a launch title. It was basically the only launch title. And yes, I'm going to disrespect Pilot Wings like that. It wasn't just Mario transitioning to 3D. It was the face of the gaming industry developing a footprint for how that transition needed to go. It shouldn't be remotely a surprise to anyone. I mean, just think of all the impacts it had to the gaming industry that aren't talked about as much as the movement in 3D space. Collectathons became standard, open sandbox stages became regular occurrences. You couldn't open a kitchen cabinet without a hub world falling on your head. The nostalgia for genres, for a new console generation, for freaking joysticks. All of these things are associated with Mario 64. It's incredible. But it's also the reason why the nostalgia for this game is uniquely not unique. All of this obviously made the game untouchable for a very long time. Opinions for video games were cemented with the turn of the millennium, and you were not allowed to go against the industry norm. Game critics made up their mind and filled up pedestals for viewers and readers to acknowledge. Anyone that couldn't keep up just didn't stand a chance. And even if they could keep up, they could never live up to the standard and discourse of the gaming populace had set. For a brief moment in time, many kids born in the 80s tried to argue that Mario stopped being fun when it added a third dimension. And those arguments were quickly silenced by the international gaming community. But if you're a Mario 64 fan and you're sick of all the criticism the game has released throughout the years, or you're sick of the people that grew up with the game and loved it talking about how revisiting it is a chore and it's not as good as they remember, and you just want to hear someone talk about how good the game is with no asterisks, no objectivity, no attempt at appealing to the modern gamer, well, I guess the algorithm did its job since you're listening to this right now. Anyway, there are thousands of videos on this game spread across hundreds of topics. Whether it's the control, speedrunning, modding, hidden secrets, or the Mandela effects. Despite the fact that this game has gotten significantly more hate in the past decade than it did in the 2 decades prior to it, it also got a whole ton of love as well. Again, the nostalgia for this game is almost as unique as the legacy itself. It's one of the few games that live outside of the nostalgia cycle. In most games, when the gaming community hits a certain age and decides the game is old and outdated, or when they decide a bad game is now suddenly meant to be loved, that becomes a firm opinion online. But Mario 64 is special. It will be defended, and it will be loved by just as many people that try to argue that it's old and outdated. Regardless, I'm not necessarily here trying to defend the game or argue against certain points. I'm sure there might be moments throughout where I'll mention the controls and say the camera isn't as bad as people make it out to be, but that's not really what I'm setting out to do. This is a passion project for me. I've been saving Mario 64 for the right time, ever since I started my YouTube channel. Heck, I'm not even sure if this is the right time, but at least I get to talk about this game, so I know I'll be in my own happy little nostalgia-filled bubble. I'm going to enjoy making this retrospective in a very different way than I enjoy making all of my previous videos. There will probably be a smile on my face all throughout, and I might actually find myself watching this video over again after I upload it, which I rarely do. This is like a memoir of a staple experience of my life and the nostalgia created through every aspect of the game. And like I said, the nostalgic experiences for Mario 64 are uniquely not unique. So my hope is that as I dive into the various stages, stars, secrets, soundtracks, art styles, and controls of this game, I trigger something in all fans of this iconic title and make them enjoy a pretty easygoing and laid-back retrospective of the most discussed video game of all time. So stick around, because next, I'm gonna discuss the hub world. Figuring out how to implement a hub world without making it feel like a glorified menu is nothing short of a form of art. Game development, in general, is not something I have experience in. However, it is something I've learned to appreciate through my decades of gaming. When it comes to hub worlds in particular, I found that it has always been very difficult for me to appreciate them. I can respect the effort thrown in when they're created, but more often than not, I always feel like they're too complex, or would have been better off replaced with a simple menu. I've teetered between what makes a good hub world for a long time. Heck, the discussion has occasionally come up during my other videos, and I think I've narrowed my thoughts down into a handful of talking points and boxes to check. But what it ultimately comes down to is at the end of the game, you ask yourself if it would be better off without the hub world. If your immediate thought is that it would be, then the hub world is ultimately a failure. And well, you probably figured out where I'm going with this by now, but I think Peach's Castle in Mario 64 is a phenomenal hub world. The castle grounds allow you to learn all about the movement and physics of the game. You get to experiment with climbing trees, slopes, swimming, and even monkey bars if you swing underneath the bridge. It's not unique since even the worst hub world allows you to experiment with the control and learn to interact with your environment, but it is the earliest and most iconic implementation of this philosophy. And it was critical not just for Mario, but for the entire gaming industry to get this right. The castle grounds in and of itself is where many kids spent their childhood. The hub world directs you through the game without obnoxiously holding your hand. You're outside, so naturally you'll walk in through the front door and get really the only semblance of the plot that exists in this game. Peach telling you to find her because she made you some cake. You'll find doors with stars on them that are locked and might notice one without a number. That one is not locked. There'll be nothing but a platform and a picture on the wall. If you're experimental, you might bump into the wall of the picture and notice it rippled, and hopefully figure out you can jump into the picture itself. Or you might have a discussion with some of the toads around the castle, and they'll nudge you in the right direction. When you get a star, you might figure out the doors with a 1 on them are unlocked. You'll also notice a door upstairs eventually that has 3 stained glass paintings, and if you experiment, you'll find a secret slide, which will open your eyes towards the other secrets around the castle. There'll be a couple of wooden doors that aren't locked that you can run through, and they'll take you to a locked door with a keyhole, similar to the door you noticed in the main floor. There also will be a boo that might bait you into following him down the hall into a courtyard with seemingly nothing there, until you get enough stars and you're able to defeat one of the boos to enter a stage. You'll get more stars, unlock more doors, find more secrets, and eventually, the door with a giant star on it will be accessible. You run through the door and see Peach. Sprint towards her because you're ready to save her. And all of a sudden, the picture has completely shifted to Bowser, and you're dropped through a trap door. Honestly, it's such a simple moment, but I remember the first time watching my older brother playing. He entered the room and we all started to shout, "Oh, it's Princess! Run to the Princess!" And then immediately we switched to, "Oh my god, no, it's King Koopa!" I imagine many others had similar experiences, but it's one of my favorite memories of this game. You'll defeat Bowser and get a key. You'll try to unlock the upstairs door, but it won't let you through, which will make you explore until you find the door down in the basement if you haven't already gone that way. You'll find a picture on the wall. You know what to do. You'll find some other doors too that'll either lead to stages or some random secrets, like 2 pillars that if you ground pound on them will drain the water around the castle grounds and allow you to re-enter the castle grounds. This not only serves as a secret which unlocks a new bonus stage which will lead to a power-up cap, but it also allows you direct access to the basement of the castle the next time you play. At one point you'll find a bunny and curiously chase it. Catching it will give you a star, but chasing it might make you run into a wall that will ripple the way the paintings do, allowing you to enter a stage. You might speak to a toad and get a secret star that'll make you go around to speak to all the toads, which will help uncover more hints and provide more secret stars. You'll certainly end up on the main floor again at some point and discover a light shining down where a bonus stage will unlock another power-up cap. You'll get enough stars to enter another Bowser stage, which is hidden behind the first star in a level you have to play through. You'll get another key and head back upstairs and repeat it all over again. More toads to speak to, more paintings to jump through, more rippling walls, a fun Easter egg where you can see the game's cameraman Lakitu flowing behind you, a fun art gallery of all the paintings to explore, another flight of stairs to the hardest stages in the game. You'll have to find a way to enter these stages since you can't use a simple jump to get in there. But this is so far along in the game, and you've already learned how to backflip and wall jump, so it's no issue. The final stage is a clock. And if you experiment, you'll figure out that depending on what time the clock has when you enter it, it'll change the pace of everything in that stage. If you decide to run through the top of the tower prior to having enough stars, the game won't lock you out. It'll let you in. You'll run up the stairs and figure out that you can't get anywhere. Endless sinister music that would naturally make every kid see if maybe they run long enough, they can get to the end. You might try for a while, but eventually you'll realize it's all pointless. Well, until you discover the backwards long jump, but that's a discussion for another time. With 70 stars, you'll be able to access the final fight, however. And with the final fight against Bowser, you'll have done it. You won. The game edges you in the right direction almost every step of the way. There will be points where you might get stuck. Maybe you can't catch a bunny rabbit. Maybe you didn't realize Toad will give you a star. Maybe the entrance to a stage is a bit too complex for you to figure out. But the game does a hell of a job minimizing those moments and really making sure the frustration you find is limited. They spread the stages out on different floors of the castle so that you can associate each world with one of the floors, and each floor is locked behind a Bowser battle or a star threshold. The secrets are a longer path and very easy to stumble upon at first, with more of them offering a bit of challenge but not too much to frustrate someone that's not looking to fully complete the game. Peach's Castle in and of itself is iconic. You'll realistically have played 2D Mario games before this, and now that you're actually in the castle of the princess you saved so many times, you'll want to explore it. Nothing is too complex. Nothing is too overtly linear, despite the game offering you a good amount of linear progression to expand on the difficulty. The whole experience just doesn't feel pointless. It feels like a treat. There's extrinsic and intrinsic value in exploring the castle. It is effectively a stage in this game, maybe even the main stage, but without all of the hidden intricate pressure of being an actual stage. I don't think there's anything I can say to truly highlight just how crucial it was that they got this hub world right, but hot damn did they get it right, and I am so happy they did. Peach's Castle is my favorite hub world. In my opinion, it does everything right. If it wasn't for the blatant nostalgia bias, I might even argue that it was the best hub world in gaming, but I won't succumb you all to that. The hub world is done so well that simply shrugging it off as something that's already been discussed or viewing it as iconic for its time but no longer anything special is downright the most disrespectful thing I've ever heard repeatedly said on this platform, and I can't believe people can get away with saying it. You'll spend at least some portion of this game noticing a sewer outside of the lake. Eventually, when you get a hang of the camera controls, you might even start to peer down there and notice a cannon. You might periodically return to that area to see if the cannon was unlocked as you get more stars, but it'll remain locked all throughout. The game is fun, and you'll certainly go back and look for stars you missed. After all, you played through a lot of the stages and didn't get all of the stars you can, and moved on because some of them were too difficult. But you'll grind, you'll hunt, you might ask a friend or use a strategy guide if you get stuck. But you'll eventually make it to the 120 star benchmark. You'll now want to see if all of the rumors of Yoshi being in Mario 64 are true. Those bizarre claims made by other kids in the playground. So you'll enter the cannon, blast off to the top of the castle and find Yoshi. And you'll be rewarded with a whole lot of lives. And a red flying cap which allows you to circle all around the castle grounds. The same castle grounds that 120 stars ago you were simply learning how to run in. You're now given the ability to fly over and look down upon from the highest of heights. Because you've done it, you've beaten the game, you've conquered the hub world and all of its contents. Bob-omb Battlefield is cool because it immediately teaches you the correct way to pronounce Bob-omb since it's spelled out for you. Not sure why some people will call them Bob-ombs instead, but I guess since we live in a world where people pronounce Mario as Mario, anything is possible. Anyway, Bob-omb Battlefield is iconic for being the first 3D Mario stage ever, but I also think it's a bit underwhelming that it holds that title. I'm not sure exactly what it is about Bob-omb Battlefield, but I've never found it nearly as unique as the other stages on the first floor of Peach's Castle. It's not that the stage isn't unique. I mean, there are some very memorable set pieces that will stick out immediately in my mind by simply uttering the name of the stage. But as far as leaving a lasting imprint and starting the game off with a bang, I think the stage falls just a tad bit short and Whomp's Fortress might do a better job in that department. But I'm being a bit harsh on the old opener. After all, by the time someone makes it to the battlefield, they'll have already run around the castle grounds, and that alone would have provided the early game wow factor that the battlefield lacks. But I'm getting ahead of myself. If there's one thing I can't take away from the opening stage, it's the soundtrack. It's such a cheery and upbeat melody that you can't help but bob-omb along with it the first time you hear it. It throws you into a giant grassy area with plenty going on all around you and a few different routes you can take. There is a primary path that a first-time player is likely to follow. And although these maps aren't linear, many stars in this game create a linear route that somewhat makes the game feel like it has a linear objective in the same manner of Mario 3D World. I probably don't need to discuss the technical limitations too much, but the logic is since they couldn't create 100 stages, instead you'd have 15 stages with 7 missions. Each of those missions would effectively serve as a single stage. There's the obvious downside here in that you'll have to spend a lot of time getting kicked out of the stage and restarting every time you finish one of those missions and grab a star. And that seems to irk people quite a bit. It might even frustrate me on occasion. But on a first time playthrough, I really don't think it's that obnoxious. If anything, I think letting you restart the stage is good because you can reorient yourself since you haven't memorized the map yet. And B, again from a first time perspective, I don't really think there are that many moments where you'll save a ton of time by not being thrown back out into the hub world, since you don't know off the top of your head where the next star is. It helps to restart the mission because you can get the name of the star objective, which is effectively the only hint available. Additionally, by being thrown back into the hub world, it gives you a chance to move on to other stages and along the way discover newly unlocked doors and secrets. Now obviously, there are more effective ways these benefits can be implemented. A pause screen, for example, that lists the names of the stars and hints provided. You could even save up some time by simply being thrown back to the start of the stage instead of the hub world, or even simply being asked if you'd like to be sent back to the hub world. These are all practices that can be nitpicked at in hindsight, and they're complaints that can be made with an industry that has advanced. But given the time of the release of this game, I think they gave people the best option. If players weren't sent back to the hub world, I don't think they ever would have realized they could enter new stages without getting all 7 stars in Bob-omb Battlefield unless there was a tutorial. But again, part of the brilliance of this title, and really the brilliance of Nintendo in general and good game design as a whole, is the ability to convince a player they're playing a game while they're being taught, rather than teaching them outright via a tutorial. And I think the fact that players are sent back to the hub world is just another example of that. You can argue it's outdated now. I wouldn't agree, but you can argue it. But the argument I won't take is that they designed it this way strictly for the sake of padding. Because like I just explained, on a first-time playthrough, minus the smallest of handfuls of stars, the time spent having to go back to the start of the stage is almost negligible when you consider the amount of time a player will spend reorienting themselves in the stage to find a star they haven't got an idea of where to look for. These stars are, for the most part, meant to be found along a specific route. And as I go through these stages in this retrospective, I'll keep a tally of the amount of stars and stages that are actually considerably worse because you have to start the stage over from the start. For now, we'll go back to Bob-omb Battlefield. Your first star is Big Bob-omb on the summit. As soon as you start the stage, you'll notice a mountain out in the distance and a dirt path you're meant to follow. You can veer off the path if you'd like, and that will allow you to interact with different parts of the environment to collect coins or defeat enemies, but as long as you return to the main path, you'll effectively get to see the whole map. You'll pass through the open field, sprint past the chain chomp, jump over the battleground, and make it to the mountain. You might even fall off the bridge and discover a 1-up and a switch that'll open the door and take you back to the beginning of the stage, which can serve as a shortcut depending on the mission you're on. You might even notice the floating platforms that can serve as an elevator that will allow you a different route to take. You'll get to experiment with these various set pieces because at this point in time, you're still learning the stage, learning the game. There are no bottomless pits here. It's all about experimentation and understanding the laws of this title. When you make it to the foot of the mountain, you'll be given your task of climbing the summit and dodging the cannonballs. If you're not careful, you could very well be dropped all the way back down and have to start the trek all over. I've always thought this was a neat first star to collect because climbing this mountain in many ways felt like the evolution of the original Donkey Kong arcade title. You're working your way up while dodging giant rolling obstacles, but this time, you're in 3D. This truly was the wildest generational evolution. Anyway, along the path you might be jumping into these little alcoves to dodge the cannonballs, and you might accidentally discover a shortcut. Again, the game is teaching you about these kinds of shortcuts because it knows you, as a player, would logically want to dodge the oncoming cannonball. So now, along with the many other things we've learned by simply running through this path, we also know that these strange shortcuts are a thing as we go forward through the map. You'll eventually make it to the top of the mountain. It might not be the most intuitive boss fight the first time around, you might have to experiment a few times to figure out you need to punch him from behind to grab him, and you might try and throw him off the edge of the mountain instead of simply tossing him. But I think most people will quickly figure out the quick tosses do the trick and be able to collect their first star. It's an easy fight, but it's literally the first star of the game. It takes quite a while to get to too, because again, you're not just completing a mission, you're learning the game. Next up, it's a foot race with Koopa the Quick. As soon as you start, you'll notice a big ol' Koopa that you can interact with, and he'll challenge you to a race to the top of the summit. He'll even trick you a bit because he'll take a route that you can't access. The whole point of this race is to test your ability to traverse with speed. It's basically a time trial without being a time trial. You're on your second star now. You've seen most of what you need to see, so now you're to put that skill to the test and find out how much control over Mario you've actually accomplished. Next up is shoot to the island in the sky. Keep in mind at this point, you'd be allowed to head to a few unlocked doors on the main floor if you'd like, so when you're thrown back to the hub world, you might rather go and dig around a bit. It's really up to the player, and for many reasons I've already discussed, I think that's an excellent philosophy. But I'm not trying to make this any more complex than it needs to be, so we're just going to go stage by stage here. This second star is meant to teach you about the cannon gimmick in this game. A critical gimmick, I might add, and one that will drastically improve your experience if you learn how to use it properly. When you start the mission, you'll likely notice a pink Bob-omb that isn't defeatable, and sticks out like a sore thumb. If you approach it in an attempt to attack it, it'll notify you that it'll prepare the cannons for you. At this point, you'll be able to jump in and start experimenting with blasting yourself off into the abyss. You'll naturally want to aim for the island in the sky, since that's the name of the star. And you'll also more than likely figure out that it's not as easy to aim and you'll land somewhere in the field. You might notice a nearby cannon that you can try and use to get on the island, or you might remember the other cannons you ran past on your first mission that were up the mountain, and head over to those since that would make the shot easier. Either way, it's pretty obvious that this star is on the island, and you'll have to experiment with the cannons around the stage and gain a bit of mastery on how to aim them properly in order to collect the star. Next up, it's the 8 red coin star. If you're not the type of player to intentionally go out of your way to explore, the red coin star is the mission that will make you learn everything you can about the stage whether you like it or not. And it might even be the first star a newcomer will decide they need to use a strategy guide for. By the time you get to this mission, you'll likely have noticed at least a few red coins around the stage. The first one is on a floating platform that you'll have to master Mario's different jumps to get on. The one behind the chain chomp you'll have to be quick to nab without getting hurt. One in the island in the sky. One in the field. 2 next to the stumps. And 1 next to the one up by a shortcut switch. These are, for the most part, areas you have explored already or can fairly easily discover as you go on your search throughout the battlefield. The one that would usually give the most trouble is hidden on top of this slope here that you might have accidentally spotted earlier if you fell off the mountain. But aside from that, it's an easy one to miss and really the primary challenge of the red coin star. Still, it's in a decent enough location to discover, and like I said, the red coin star in this stage does a good job really allowing a player to learn all there is about it. Star number 5 is a bit unique in that you're not supposed to get it prior to unlocking the wing cap, which, as many of you already know, is unlocked at 10 stars when you're standing in the middle of the castle's lobby and look up into the shining light and enter the secret area to pounce on the switch. However, as you can see here, it is achievable without getting the red cap. But realistically, by the time a player is returning to Bob-omb Battlefield to collect the star, they have a bit more mastery of the game and Mario's control. They know for the most part how to flip, cartwheel, long jump, crawl, and whatnot. They hopefully are a bit better at using the cannon too. Again, the hope is that when you enter the stage, you'll remember the locations of the red boxes from before that were originally invisible. Those boxes will grant you wings that you'll likely have to experiment with a bit to learn to control. You'll also hopefully already know to use one from inside the cannon, but if not, the star is titled Mario Wings to the Sky, so you'll most likely be drawn towards the island in the sky again, where you'll notice a trail of coins, a wing cap box, and a cannon all next to each other. You might even have noticed it before unlocking the red cap and tried to collect those coins with a cannon and notice a strange tune and counter pop up indicating you collected a unique coin. Whether you discovered it organically, or again relied on a strategy guide or help from a friend or Google, you'll have to use said cannon to blast off and collect the center coin in the trails of the rings. This will once again be good practice for mastery of the cannons, which will come in handy later in this game, as well as mastery of the flying wing cap, which again will come in handy as you progress. Finally, the last star is behind Chain Chomp's gate. A curious player might have already collected the star without knowing what it was called, since this game doesn't require you unlock the mission or even select the objective to collect a star. Whether you're grabbing the star earlier in the playthrough or later on, you'll have to learn that ground pounding these stumps will flatten them. There are 4 in the stage in an open area, and once you figure out how you can actually lower them via the ground pound, you'll start using the ground pound in other critical moments as the game goes on, like in the basement when you drain the water around the castle, for example. Either way, once you know how to flatten these things, you'll see Chain Chomp is attached to one, and you'll hopefully go ahead and see if you can make quick hip drops and free the good boy. He'll break the gate and give you full access to the star, and with that, you'll have completed all 6 missions for this stage. But you're not done yet, because again, you might have learned this later on in your playthrough by accident, but at some point a player is likely going to try and collect 100 coins. In every Mario game prior to this one, we would collect 100 coins because it would give us a 1-up. So a curious player will naturally be inclined to collect 100 coins. even if it's just to see what happens when they do. Killing enemies will give you coins. Red coins are worth 2 coins. Blue coins are worth 5 coins. All of this adds up to 100 coin stars spread out evenly throughout the game. Depending on how efficient you are, good players will start stacking the red coin star with the 100 coin stars since they're collecting those 8 anyway, so it'll save a bit of time. I'm a big fan of the 100 coin stars in general because I think they're the ultimate test of mastery for this game. It's like the greatest collectathon test of a collectathon. The star in the stage is not the easiest, but out of the 15 stages in the game, there are at least 10 or 11 more frustrating than this one when it comes to the coin collecting. Really, the most obnoxious parts are the screwing up while climbing the mountain and falling down and having to climb up again. But the worst offender are the 45 coins in the sky that you would have to use a cannon to blast into to collect from Mario Wings to the Sky. It really makes you work for it, despite the fact that enemies and coins are often clustered together, so it's not like you're actually looking for 100 unique items in unique locations as a result. That being said, the worst thing is if you save the coins in the sky for last, the star spawns in the location of last coin you collected. So if you have to blast off to grab the star in the sky, it'll just create an extra annoying obstacle for you. Also, since you're collecting the coins in the sky and the red coins, you might accidentally summon those stars, and if you run into them by accident, then you'd have to start the whole collecting thing all over again, and that could really drive you mad. Especially in some of the more complex stages. Because losing a life or grabbing a star will exit you from the stage and require you to start the collection over. The neat thing is, the 100 coin collecting star doesn't send you back to the hub world. I think that's obviously because whenever you do discover the 100 coin star, you might already be working towards a different star. So they didn't want to send players back to the hub world as a punishing reward for their mastery of collecting. This way, as you advance through the game, if at any point in time you find yourself with a decent amount of coins, you can just decide to halt your objective and grab the 100 coin star prior to collecting whatever star it is you're trying to grab. See, if they really wanted to pad the game out, they'd have intentionally sent you back to the hub world with a 100 coin star too. Or heck, they probably would have explicitly made the 100 coin stars one of the missions of the stage to pad it out even more. I genuinely don't think there was an intention or even a need to pad this game out. I think the first time player would naturally gain no advantage from staying in the stage, and that's why they sent you back to the hub world. Again, strictly speaking about the average player, not the rest of us that have hundreds of hours in this game. When you finish beating Bob-omb, none of the stars are really in an optimal position for you to head towards in a more advantageous route. Shoot to the Island in the Sky has the pink Bob-omb right at the start of the stage, so it's better for a player to be placed there. Likewise with Foot Race with Koopa the Quick. Mario Wings to the Sky generally requires the red cap to be unlocked, so you most likely won't be grabbing it immediately after Shoot to the Island in the Sky or the red coin star or whatever. I could maybe put an asterisk on all of the 8 red coin missions in all the stages in the game, but I think it's a good test for a first time player to use that objective without any other distractions to learn the ins and outs of the game with the scavenger hunt. Especially considering some players won't even be aiming for full completion and are strictly looking just to defeat Bowser. And in those players' cases, the red coin star will be the ultimate scavenger hunt, not the 100 coin star. So I think making that its own standalone objective is valuable and should let players start the stage off from the start point so they can explore with their 8 targets in mind and nothing else. The only star I could argue would make that big of a difference for this stage would be Chain Chomp's Gate. You should be able to just grab that as soon as you figure out the stump and not have to be sent back to the hub world. I'd still argue that it's close enough to the start of the stage and doesn't really matter all that much, but I'll be generous and concede this 1 star for you all so that I'm not applying even more bias than I'm clearly incapable of separating myself from. But yeah, that basically wraps up Bob-omb Battlefield. Like I said, I don't think it aesthetically provides enough of a wow factor to hold the title of first 3D Mario stage, but I think it does an excellent job introducing players to so many different mechanics. I didn't even mention the heart regenerator for your health, or the fall damage you'll likely encounter, or how you'll have to learn to slow walk or crawl across a tiny bridge. There are many elements learned here in a relatively low-risk environment that will be applied later on in the game. And I think Bob-omb Battlefield alone should be praised as not only an iconic stage due to its legacy, but there should be lessons learned from what this stage taught players about the fundamentals of the remainder of the game. Bob-omb Battlefield basically did to 3D Mario what Level 1-1 did to 2D Mario, and I don't think it's nearly praised as much as it should be for that accomplishment. I've always felt as though Whomp's Fortress carried the weight of being the first real stage of Mario 64. Bob-omb Battlefield, for all of its charm and accomplishments, felt more like an extension of the implicit tutorial that began out in the castle grounds. It was a stage meant to teach you the laws and rules of Mario 64, and what it meant to complete a stage or collect a star. This is largely why it had no bottomless pits, because the stage designers wanted you to experiment and learn how to play the game in Bob-omb Battlefield. So they had to ease you into the challenge of the game. In Whomp's Fortress, you're immediately taken to the next level because not only are there bottomless pits, but the routes are a lot narrower and require you to really learn to comfortably control Mario to succeed. A control that you needed in Bob-omb Battlefield, but in Whomp's Fortress, failure to master that control can often lead to a loss of a life. Additionally, I think the aesthetic in Whomp's Fortress sticks out just a bit more than Bob-omb Battlefield, where that stage just feels like a vast and open grassy world that can be pasted into most platformers of the time. Whomp's Fortress has a more iconic layout and landmark that visually has more memorable characteristics. And I don't think that's a reach either. When they decided to steer into nostalgia in Mario Galaxy, they didn't bring back the battlefield, they brought back Whomp's Fortress, and I think that is specifically for the reasons I just mentioned. You start off in a lower grassy area, at the foot of the fortress, which will have some patches of flowers that contain piranha plants. When you're done exploring the grassy area, you'll likely want to head up the incline path, and there are 2 routes you could take. One of them requires you to use a wall jump or a backflip to climb. The reward for mastering these more advanced maneuvers is a simpler path. Otherwise, you're going to have to maneuver around obstacles and bottomless pits and even thwomps to move up the fortress. A first-time player might struggle with the higher jump, especially a younger first-time player. But if they put in the effort, then the route with the fewer risks is much more rewarding. Next, you'll have 2 challenges to face, both of which offer their own unique experience. Either you scoot across the narrow path on the wall and attack the piranha plant blocking your path, or you can take a long jump or run across the blocks that drop as soon as you step on them so you can't slow down at all, followed by passing by a narrow bridge. Both of these challenges are actually likely to get a hold of you the first few times you play. Multiple routes, both with a different type of challenge, and both will teach you to better control the mustachioed plumber. And you'll probably fall a few times. If you get by those, you get to move across a revolving platform. You'll notice the drop down below lands you on a slope rather than a flat ground. This is because the game expects you to fall down during this challenge, and you might already be low on health because of the piranha plants on your way here. So rather than being a frustrating death trap, when you land on the slope you won't lose any health. Instead, your punishment will once again be standing in the pool of water and having to work your way back up, over and over again. Beyond that, it's a pretty straight shot minus some whomps that will try to crush you. And you'll quickly figure out when they're flat on the floor, that's your chance to ground pound them and defeat them. You'll make it to some rising platforms that will take you up to face off against Whomp himself. Defeating him is pretty straightforward. He goes down the same way the smaller Whomps went down. 3 hits, and he's done. And you'll have your first star. Aptly titled, Chip Off the Whomp's Block. When you start the second objective, the stage will transform, but only on the location on top where the Whomp fight took place, which means you're going to have to go through the whole stage again for a second time. When you make it to the top, you'll notice a newly constructed tower and just a whole lot more commotion and obstacles all around you. Your goal is to face this minor challenge of platforming and dodging to get to the top of the tower where you will receive the second power star. Next up is Shoot into the Wild Blue. Similar to Bob-omb Battlefield, this is meant to be a cannonball star, but more advanced players have figured out that you can just wall jump and grab it. This one is a bit more tough. Thankfully, the game throws a climbing pole for you to aim for, so you're not just shooting and praying for a perfect shot to the star. Next up is Red Coin atop the floating aisle. There are 6 red coins along the routes you've already taken. Only this star will require you to search for them and get comfortable with the varying aspects of the stage, like jumping on the bursting blocks from the wall or standing on the top of the thwomp as he rises up, comfortably defeating the piranha plants if you haven't already figured that out, and being able to swing around a rotating platform without falling off. But the name of the star is atop the floating aisle, and that's because when you get to the top of Whomp's Fortress, you'll have to kick down a standing plank of wood to create a narrow bridge, which will require you to carefully platform along the islands to grab the 2 remaining coins. This is probably the most difficult area in the stage. You'll notice a cage right next to you which will contain the 5th star. You might think this means you're meant to make your way back up to the aisle again to get into the cage, but the jump into that cage is very difficult. That's because this star is meant to be collected by flying up there with the owl and dropping into the cage, which is much easier said than done on a first time go around. Whenever you figure out the owl is in the tree, you'll hopefully know that it's the only real way to fall into the cage since it's the highest location in the fortress. After that, the final star is basically a puzzle. You have to blast away the wall. I am curious to know how people figured this one out. I still vividly remember seeing my older brother grabbing it, but I'm not sure if he figured it out on his own or if a friend told him. I mean, in hindsight, it seems pretty simple. You're blasting, so you should naturally head towards the cannon. And once you do, there are only so many walls you can aim for. But I think this one is a bit harder to figure out without some help. Beyond that, it's a 100 coin collection star. Probably the easiest or second easiest stage to collect 100 coins in. It's a small area, fairly simple to traverse, every Whomp you defeat gives you 5 coins, and the blue coin block alone will give you 20 coins, and they're fairly easy to collect within the allotted time limit. It's a good challenge for players going for the full 120 stars because it allows them to search the entire stage in a deeper lens than those that are simply trying to get the 8 red coins. In general, I don't feel like any of the stars are really overtly repetitive on a first time playthrough. The design here borrows from Bob-omb Battlefield in that your first star is just meant to give you a general scope of the stage as you rise towards the top. The second star, while yes would be easier to nab if you start from where the first star ended, allows you to repeat the stage and take alternate routes and challenges that you may have not faced the first time around. The third star requires the use of the cannon, which for the most part is easier to access from the start of the stage rather than from where the other 4 stars end. The 4th star is a red coin scavenger hunt, so it makes sense that you start at the beginning of the stage for that. And the 5th star requires the owl, which again is right at the start of the stage. And the final star requires the cannon to blast into the wall, which I would say is probably similar to the Chain Chomp star in Bob-omb's Battlefield in that you should be able to really just grab that one while going through the stage, since it's more or less along your path, as long as you figure out how to solve the puzzle. Even though the cannon is fairly easy to access from the start of the stage, but I can yield it. Which means from the 2 stages, I'd say there are only really 2 out of the 14 stars that feel super redundant or somewhat like padding due to the fact that you always have to leave the stage and re-enter. Whereas the rest of them feel like they fit in with the formula of the game and that it naturally exits a first time player back to the hub to allow them to either go and play another stage, explore the castle, or jump back into the painting for a fresh start in the stage without having to reorient themselves in a stage they haven't completely memorized yet. But anyway, I think Whomp's Fortress is a lot of fun. Where Bob-omb Battlefield seemed to have focused more on the collecting and searching aspect of the game due to its safer and larger layout, Whomp's Fortress focuses a lot more on your ability to control Mario and maneuver not only around stage hazards, but unique enemies. I haven't really discussed Mario's controls and cameras all that much yet, but the stage does give you ample challenges to learn how to comfortably adapt all of the varying quirks in relation to controlling both the camera and Mario himself. For a first-time entrance in the 3rd dimension, this was critical for players to learn how to be comfortable in a 3D space, and even more for modern gamers revisiting a control system that isn't quite as intuitive as Mario Odyssey. Whomp's Fortress can be the gateway stage that allows them to adjust for the intricate changes in the control style. I don't know if I'll really go in depth into Mario's controls. Maybe I'll speak a bit more about them in the conclusion of this retrospective. But I will remind you all that I'm the same person that went through all of the Sonic games and didn't mind any of the drastic changes in controls, because after 1 or 2 levels I was able to adapt and enjoy the game without shrugging it off as a failure because it didn't feel exactly like I wanted it to feel. And Mario 64 is more similar to something like Odyssey than Sonic Heroes or Shadow of 5 are to Shadow Generations. So if I was fine with it there, then you can be certain I'm going to be fine with the adjustment here. I think I can acknowledge that Mario has controlled better than Mario 64. I would hope he did. Mario 64 is pushing 30 years soon. But I can also enjoy the game and its controls for what they are and not scoff at them for the sake of scoffing at them, and blowing their outdated implementation out of proportion just because I had to spend a few minutes adapting to them. That's just the way I approach video games. So if you're looking for the punchline where I say all you youngins are right, and Mario 64 has crappy controls and a crappy camera and is not playable today, well, that's not happening because quite frankly, I don't really believe it's true. But anyway, it's time to head over to Jolly Roger Bay. I hate water levels, and it's primarily because of Jolly Roger Bay. There, I said it. It took a very long time for 3D games to figure out swim controls, and although I've gotten better at controlling the best of the classic 3D platformers, there's always a sense of dread when I know I'm going to have to revisit a water level, especially from that era. Honestly, my hatred for water levels probably goes way back to the anxiety I felt playing Sonic on the Genesis. But even when I think back to the water levels in Donkey Kong on SNES, despite the fact that the underwater controls in that game were much easier to get used to, there was still a sense of unease in me during those games. Jolly Roger Bay does a lot right. It aesthetically gives off the feeling of being in an isolated and secluded alcove. The background theme is devastatingly accurate to how I feel as I explore the watery depths. The obnoxiously slow controls are only made more frustrating by the limited time underwater Mario has before losing all of his health and drowning. In many ways, they get the atmosphere, the feel of the stage, to really make it seem like you're going on the swim yourself. Aside from the terrifyingly accurate ambiance, Jolly Roger Bay starts you off on a small plot of land with little to see or do. You're clearly meant to head straight out into the water and explore. The first star is titled Plunder the Sunken Ship. Now obviously, every player approaches these things differently. In the previous 2 stages, I always found myself exploring every plot of land before I moved forward across the main path. In a water level where controls are slow and death is looming, I tend to find myself going straight for the objective without spending too much time dawdling. As you swim out away from the shore, there will be an underwater cliff that will require you to plunge down to the depths, hopefully collecting coins to refill your health along the way, since you'll slowly lose health underwater, because the air meter was not yet implemented. Of course, resurfacing will also refill your health. As you head deeper into the bay's depths, you'll find your objective, the sunken ship. As you search it, you'll probably get the heck scared out of you when the nightmare-inducing eel pops its head out of a hole. You're basically meant to lure the eel out so you can enter the hole. Oh, also this is a very long eel. These things always made me feel uneasy. I mean, it's bad enough you're in this dark and gloomy stage with the soft music playing and the only sound you can really focus on is the swooshing of Mario swimming, but then you see these giant eels and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if one day I discover I have some kind of phobia because of the stage. When the eel comes out, you get to go inside the ship, and in there will be a whole lot of water and 3 treasure chests. There will be a space for you to catch your breath and regain some health as you figure out the puzzle and order in which you're meant to open the chests. And when that's all said and done, the ship will begin to surface and the water will drain out, allowing you the chance to undergo some pinpoint platforming to reach the yellow block and free the first power star of the stage. Piece of cake. The next star is yet another nightmare-inducing star. I remember 6-year-old me seeing Can the Eel Come Out to Play and absolutely exiting the stage to revisit it later. Honestly, if it wasn't for deciding to go for full completion of this game as a kid, I'd never have completed anything in Jolly Roger Bay. Everyone refers to it as a 3rd level, but for me it's basically one of the last 2 or 3 levels I complete. And the 2nd star is one of the reasons for that. I hated the eel. I hated the swimming. I hated the atmosphere. I just always felt like I was going to drown here. It wasn't fun. Basically, for the next star, you have to swim down there and find a little alcove on the underground wall which an eel will peek its head out of. When the eel exits the alcove this time, a star will be connected to its tail. That's your target. Sounds easy enough, but with the way swimming controls feel and just, you know, everything else I'm whining about, it's a pain to collect. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can get through Jolly Roger Bay with my eyes closed now, but that's after dozens of playthroughs. But on a 1st or 2nd or maybe even 3rd time, it's such a pain. Honestly, I'm surprised the water areas don't get more hate in this game. Everyone always goes on about how amazing the soundtrack and ambiance is, and how this is one of their favorite stages as a result. Meanwhile, upbeat music in a stage full of mushrooms is a big no-no because of C-buttons and monkey. If everyone could just channel all their Mario 64 complaints to Jolly Roger Bay, I think we could find a common ground and agree that it's the worst stage in the game, and everything else is just dandy. Anyway, after you probably die a bunch and get a game over and finally grab the star on the tail of the eel, it's time for the ocean cave. Once again, you have to swim all the way across the same route. There are areas to explore if you'd like, but why bother? It's a stupid water level. Make it to the cave, swim into the cave, enter a new area above ground, solve the same type of treasure chest opening puzzle, and you get the power star. Next up is red coins. Fine, I'll go through it. From the starting area, there's an alternate route that you can maneuver through. It involves some pillars you can climb on, platforms you can jump on, switch puzzles you can time your traversal across, and eventually make your way towards the previously sunken ship. On that route alone, there are 5 out of the 8 red coins. It's a pretty difficult challenge, and since it's above water, I don't mind it all too much. It's an uptick in difficulty compared to what we just went through in Whomp's Fortress, but the punishment here is falling into the water and having to slowly swim back to an area where you can comfortably get up on top of a location you can reach again. The final 3 red coins are found by traversing the water and looking inside clamshells. The issue with this red coin star is that assuming you don't know where all the coins are, which you likely wouldn't the first time around, is that you'd have to generally search the entire stage, which means you can end up heading through the cave to the area of the 3rd star and wasting a ton of time because of how slow Mario moves. And likewise, if you miss the coins being in the clams, you could spend almost an hour searching everywhere else in the stage. And I realize this is a critique that could be made about almost all of the stages, and many people have made these complaints, but the difference is I'm not complaining about the searching aspect. That's the whole point of a collectathon. That's the fun part. My complaining is strictly because of how terrible it feels to traverse such a water-heavy stage, and that's why I have an issue with the red coin star here. Star 5 is a cannon shot to the stone pillar. Hopefully during the red coin star you'd have noticed the pink bomb along your path, so he prepared the cannon for you. Similarly to the previous stage, the star is more or less in clear sight, but it's your mastery of the cannon shot that gets you the star. You need to know where and how to aim to make sure you don't miss, because if you miss, well, Yeah, more swimming. The final star is one that most people will return to because you need the metal cap to unlock it. Well, you don't actually need the metal cap, you can swim through it, but a first-time player wouldn't know. You basically just grab the cap and you can traverse underwater much more comfortably since you're weighted now. And then you go stand in the middle of the jet streams and grab the star. I assume most people might have needed a guide for this one. I don't remember. I think if you have the metal cap it's easy enough, but I distinctly remember wasting way too much time trying to get the star before having the metal cap and being extremely frustrated because, once again, the controls and underwater physics and ambiance and thalassophobia and I hate Jolly Roger Bay. Honestly, the 100 coin star is only a pain because of the stage it's in. The coins are fairly easy to get around and find, it just takes forever to find them. There are 30 coins worth of blue coins in the cave too, so that knocks a bunch of them out for you if you can collect them all in time. And it's a fair way to really learn the entire stage if you're into that. Realistically, this portion of my retrospective is probably going to be more negative than anything else I discussed about Mario 64. There's just such an innate level of frustration with Jolly Roger Bay that it almost makes me start to agree with retractors of Mario 64. The controls are awful. Sure. The camera is wonky. Definitely. Mario won't quite move where I want him to. Absolutely. All of the complaints people make about Mario on land actually do completely apply here. And even with the hundreds of hours of time put into this game, this stage in particular, I still think there was no defense. The difference between Mario's above ground controls and underwater controls is at one point in time, it was unanimous that his above ground controls were revolutionary and the industry standard, whereas his underwater controls have pretty much always been despised. So much so that as more 3D platformers replicated the style of Mario 64's water stages, more and more games began to host stages that would be considered amongst the least favorite levels for fans of the genre. In the same way Mario 64 paved the way for a whole generation of collectathons and 3D platformers, so too did it pave the way for terrible underwater stages. That's why you'll see so many random YouTubers creating lists of their least favorite water levels. Because water levels are hated. They're designed to be hated. They're designed to frustrate you. They're designed to make you feel like you're drowning and frustrated in your lack of mobility. Because, well, that's what it feels like to be underwater. Man, Nintendo got Jolly Roger Bay right after all. But perhaps they got it too right. Because future games would still give you the underwater challenge, but they'd figure out a way to make it not so debilitating and claustrophobic. It's just very hard to analyze it with an objective lens when it caused me and so many other players a hell of a difficult time back in the 90s, and probably even after the turn of the millennium. At the very least, if you can get around all of the innate drawbacks of being a water stage, I think the lineup of stars does a pretty decent job. But the problem is swimming to the sunken ship, the eel, the ocean cave, the jet streams all require you to spend way too much time getting out there and dropping downwards towards the same area. I think I'm gonna have to cross out 3 stars in this stage for feeling redundant and repetitive. I could forgive having to swim out there and diving down twice, maybe even 3 times, but out of the 7 stars in this stage, it feels like 3 of them could have drastically benefited from just being dropped into the center of the deep area without having to agonizingly swim back out there. Which means we're now at 5 out of the first 21 stars, feeling like a redundant waste of time because of the mechanic that returns us back to the hub world after every star. As crazy and probably nostalgia-driven as it is to say this, I don't hate the existence of Jolly Roger Bay. Its frustration and difficulty, and even the lack of enjoyment make it feel like a staple of Mario 64. And I don't know if my personal feelings towards it reflect the game community as a whole. Regardless, I'm glad when I replay nowadays, and I get through it with much less frustration. And I'm even more glad that the future Mario games handle the water levels much better. But anyway, we're out of the water, so it's time for the snow level. Up next is Cool Mountain. Okay, so after my super negative discussion of Jolly Roger Bay, I think I owe everyone a more positive outlook. Cool Mountain is my favorite stage of the game so far, and I always considered it a third stage in the game since Jolly Roger gave me a fourth stage vibe. Cool Mountain has a lot going for it. The snowy visuals and cheerful music really make the setting stick out, and the general vibe feel like you're on vacation in a cabin up north, partially because the stage literally starts you off next to a cabin. At first glance, this stage seems much larger than anything before it, but in actuality, it's because you start at the top of a mountain and have to work your way down. The catch is the first star hit is titled Slipping and Sliding Away, and you're hinted towards entering the nearby cabin from the chimney with coins sticking out of it. When you enter the cabin, you'll see a slide in front of you. And if you haven't already found the secret slide in the main area, this will be your first slide challenge. Mario 64 has 3 different slides in the game with a small handful of stars related to 3 of them. They're generally considered exhilarating challenges and turn the game into a test of speed and reflex control. Think to the effect of early Sonic rail grinding, but much easier. It's basically a gimmick that streamlines your control and just puts you in a high-intensity pressure situation where your failure is a loss of a life and there is little room for error. In the case of this first slide, it's not the worst test, but it does have a few moments that will catch you on a first-time playthrough. There's a specific turn here that you really need to force Mario away from the inside if there's any chance to survive, as well as a final narrow section that is more of a psychological test than anything else. Regardless, when you make it to the bottom and exit the cabin, you get your first cool star. The next power star is titled Little Penguin Lost. Depending on how much exploration you did prior to finding out the first stars down the slide in the cabin, this might be your first experience actually going through the stage. You might even recall a couple of penguins at the bottom of the mountain when you exited the cabin. Realistically, most players will now either start their journey down the mountain and find all the random pathways and branches that come off the main path until they get to the bottom, or they might just head through the slide to go and meet up with the penguin. The larger penguin will inform you it's looking for the little one, and so you'll grab a nearby penguin and bring it to her and discover it's actually the wrong penguin, and you'll start your hunt for the correct penguin. Obviously, this penguin sits back at the start of the stage, so now you have to learn how to get back up there. If you don't know it's up there, you might end up accidentally exploring the whole stage until you figure it out, and you gotta make the journey back down with the penguin in hand. If you took the slide the first time, this will be your first real attempt going down the main path because you can't take the penguin with you through the cabin. And if you didn't take the slide down on your way down, well, now you get a chance to do it all again with a crutch because you're holding the penguin, so your moveset is somewhat limited, and taking hits means you'll have to grab the penguin to continue along. The whole point of this star is to really make you learn the mountain. It isn't uncommon for a player to scale up and down the mountain 2 or 3 times by the time they figure out the objective, and that's all intentional. They want you to learn and discover anything in order to prepare you for the remaining stars. Next up is the Big Penguin Race. The hope here is you'll go back into the cabin and find a big penguin waiting to race you down the slide. A player may be tempted to head to the bottom to speak to the big penguin down there, and if they do, well, that's more traversal until you figure out the otherwise. But I think most players would have used the cabin regardless to try and fast-track their way down to that penguin anyway. So as long as you enter the cabin, you'll be greeted with a big old penguin and have to race it down the slide. Again, this just kicks it up a notch. It's not only about survival, now it's about speed and control and maneuvering around a big old obstacle. I think the penguin really used to give us trouble back in the day, and took quite some time to figure out how to outpace it. But with practice, it's a worthy challenge for another exhilarating star. Next up is the 8 red coins, and as per usual, if you haven't already spent a ton of time exploring the whole map, this star is absolutely going to make you work for it. The coins are all over the place. One is in a location near a warp too, and the warp locations are naturally areas you'll be slowly walking towards, so the game will surprise you with a quick warp. This is one of those more enjoyable red coin stars for me, and I think it's largely because I really enjoy the level and each red star feels like its own challenge to get to. They're mostly hidden in plain sight, but you have to put on your searching hat to get a hold of that sight. Next up is the Snowman's Lost Head. Like many stars in this game, in hindsight it seems so simple, but I'm not sure why this one gave me so much trouble back in the day. If you had been paying enough attention, you'll have noticed a snowman head on a platform at the bottom of the main outdoor path. You need to find the body. The body is sort of uniquely hidden in that you'll pass by it every time you head down the main route of the mountain, but not think much of it. But that's because in order to access it, you have to climb onto the area above the cabin where the lost penguin is, and then head over to the left where the body sits on its own little platform. You interact with it, and that will cause it to chase. It might take a few attempts, but you'll quickly realize the snowball is following you, so you need to remain in front of it so it follows your path. Including when you make it to the head, since if you stand on the side of the platform, it'll roll right past it. This was one of those full completion stars for me when I was younger. I'm fairly certain I couldn't figure it out until I had already beaten the 3rd Bowser and started aiming for 120. And that's part of the beauty of this game. Not everyone has to go for full completion, so there were plenty of stars that were just skipped over by a lot of people. And speaking of, the final star is perhaps the most difficult one of the stage for a few different reasons. It's obscurely titled Wall Kicks Will Work, and hidden in somewhat of a secret area. Most people will access this area with a cannon, but there are other ways to get down there. You'll run around and you'll notice some elevated platforms you can't quite reach. Cartwheels and backflips might get you started, but you'll run into a dead end. You'll have to learn how to use the long jump to get here, and then you'll be required to learn the wall kick, otherwise known as the wall jump. I'm like 90% sure you can get through this whole game minus maybe 2 stars without the wall jump, by the way. But when you do figure out the wall jump, like the long jump, it becomes such a useful tool in general that you'll wonder how you ever got by without it. The mastery doesn't really come from the collection of the star anyway. It comes in the form of how you're able to utilize that wall jumping skill as the game goes on. I just love it when Nintendo, and really all good game developers, are able to teach you through experience. The journey and reward are often tied together in these instances, and speaking of journey, the 100 coin star. As much as I want to say there's intrinsic value in this coin star because of exploring the stage is so much fun in and of itself, I'll have to remove my bias for a second and point out that for an early stage, this one could be really obnoxious. Potentially even more obnoxious than Jolly Roger Bay. Where Jolly Roger Bay was annoying because of how long it takes to swim, it's pretty easy. This one could be easy, but with all of the slides and bottomless pits, there are a heck of a lot of chances to lose a life. Not to mention you might have to traverse up and down the mountain multiple times, including using some warps to get around. And what's made even worse is since the 100 coin star always pops up exactly where you get your 100th coin, it could very well pop up right on the slide as you're going down. Don't let the fact that this is an early stage fool you. This will be one of the hardest stars to grab in the entire game. But I think it's a good type of difficulty. You're really going to earn the star and full completion if you go for it. And the reward when you collect it will be well worth it. And I still speak highly of the star despite that it might take multiple attempts to gather because A, I think the fact that you have to do 100 coins in a single life is part of the challenge and part of the enjoyment and mastery of collecting this optional star for full completion. And B, there are at least 7 stages that are more frustrating than this one with 100 coin collecting. So while it sounds like I'm saying this one is bad, it's not even close to being one of the worst ones. But anyway, that's 7 stars now. Cool Mountain is effectively the final stage in the main area of Peach's Castle. It's obviously not that cut and dry. I've gone through something like 28 stars now, and you only need 8 to take on Bowser and unlock the door to go to the basement, so you might not even play Cool Mountain prior to getting off the main floor. Or you might play it right after you get 3 stars in Bob-omb Battlefield. Such is the beauty and wonder of Mario 64. It allows you to tailor the experience to your liking. And speaking of liking, Cool Mountain gets no hate from me for kicking you out of the main stage. When you make it to the bottom of the slide and uncover the first star, yeah, it might be quicker to speak to a large penguin and then begin looking for the small penguin, but the stage is meant to be played starting from the top and heading down. So since you went down the slide for the first star without exploring, you'll basically have to work your way back up to relearn the stage, which is harder the route and not as intuitive. And then when you want to start the third star, which is the slide race, you're better off starting the stage over 2 regardless of which star you got before it, since the cabin entrance is right at the top. Red Coins is a scavenger hunt, so you're better off starting at the start of the level. Snowman Lost His Head also starts at the top of the mountain, because that's where the body is. The wall kick I'd argue is meant to be a hidden puzzle in the same manner of the 6th star in all the previous 3 stages, but I could accept an argument that you shouldn't have to make your way down to the bottom yet again to get the cannon and fire along to the other side. So, you know what, fine, I can add this one to the tally of stars that would have been made much better off if they simply kept you in the same location when you started your star hunt. Which means we're now at 6 out of 28 stars across the first 4 stages of the game that suffer because of the mechanic, and really, half of those are from Jolly Roger Bay, which really skews the balance. But I'm already being too blinded by nostalgia, so we'll ignore that. Regardless, we've done the grassy outdoors, the fortress in the sky, the watery stage, and the snowy stage. I'll save the Bowser stage and secret stars for a later discussion. In my experience, I always consider the next stage to be Lethal Lava Land, but technically this is the point where a player is supposed to gravitate towards Big Boo's haunt. So it's time to head over to that classic level and explore the Haunted Mansion. Big Boo's Haunt is the most unique stage to enter in that it feels more like a secret stage rather than an actual course in Mario 64. When a player is ready to leave the main lobby of Peach's Castle and head downstairs to unlock the door, they'll be goaded by a Boo in the long hallway and more than likely become intrigued to follow said Boo. Boo will lead you towards the courtyard in the back of the castle where you'll find a whole lot of other Boos all around you, of course assuming you already have 15 stars. You'll find one of the Boos has a strange item inside it rather than a typical coin. In my case, I don't think I had 15 stars the first time I entered the courtyard, so I went straight downstairs to the basement and entered the lava stage. First off, the stage is wonderfully presented. Like they really wanted to give off the terrifying haunted theme here, and it looks ripped straight out of your favorite Halloween movie. It's not even scary per se. Like Jolly Roger Bay was much scarier because of the implications of drowning alone in an ocean and... You know what, no, I'm not opening that fear up again. But the haunted theme here is more fun than anything else, and they do a great job playing into the eeriness. The areas of music, the areas without music, the sound effects, the general vibe and color schemes. It's really a wonderful experience just to get through. Of course, you also have the famous piano that'll make you crap your pants the first time you see it, but that's more of a jump scare than actual nightmare fuel. So there's a weird social talking point about how Mario 64 is an actual scary game. At least I think there was a popular discussion about it during COVID days. I can't remember. It was a pretty weird discussion, but if you wait long enough and a game is popular enough, there'll be discussion about everything. But yeah, I don't think this game is scary. Anyway, so you start off outside of the mansion, and you can either head towards it, run around it to the back, or move back and enter the shed, outhouse, or bomb shelter entrance, or whatever the heck this is. Said building will lead you to the basement, but we'll focus on that in a bit. Your first objective is pretty straightforward. You're going on a ghost hunt. Player logic indicates you'll enter the main lobby of the mansion first, and you'll want to explore all the rooms you currently have access to, those being the ones on the main floor, and defeat all of the boos you find. After all, this is a ghost hunt. There are 5 boos total, and each room offers its own unique little challenge. One of the rooms will have a bunch of furniture flung at you, but will also contain a picture of a boo. If you move in front of the picture and turn away from it, 2 boos will come out to attack you, and that's when you gotta crush them. Another room will have the infamous eyeball, as well as a boo you can quickly take care of. The next room will be a bit more challenging of a path to get through, with the platforms that fall as you run over them, and narrow paths close to the wall you'll have to traverse, all the while beating 2 boos along your path. You'll want to be careful not to fall down the bottomless pit, because that's how you'll end up in the basement and have to make the walk of shame all the way back up to the lobby of the mansion again. When you make it to the end of this little detour, you'll find yourself back in the main lobby of the mansion, where a big boo awaits you. It will not only release the power star, but it'll also build upstairs that leads to the second level of the mansion, which will stay built for the upcoming stars. Next up, it's riding Big Boo's merry-go-round. So this is the star where you actually want to drop down to the basement for. Once you're on the merry-go-round, it's the exact same thing. Lure out 5 boos, kill said 5 boos, defeat said Big Boo, receive the power star. While the act of the actual fight here is a bit redundant, it doesn't completely feel like a redundant power star. There's a puzzle in these first 2 stars. The first one is a mean story in the lobby on the main floor of the mansion, and the fights against boos are more of token obstacles rather than primary objectives. The second star does the same thing, except instead it's in the basement. But the catch is, in the second star, you also need to lure all of the 5 boos out of the paintings in the walls in order to defeat them. A player will go down to the merry-go-round and have to spend some time figuring out how to get the star. They might not really think the objective is killing the boos again. They might not even realize there are only 5 of them. I know I didn't. I spent like 10 to 15 minutes trying to jump through the paintings and avoid the boos when I was younger until I figured it out. So while yes, it seems like it's basically the same star objective, the not so obvious goal of exploring the different areas of the mansion is part of the objective here. But if you're sick of attacking boos for stars, how about attacking books? The next star is the secret of the haunted books. You'll traverse the second floor of the haunted house and eventually find yourself in a library filled with bookshelves. There will be a few different types of books attacking you here too. Whoever said reading wasn't dangerous clearly has never visited this mansion. At some point, you'll notice a few books sticking out of the bookshelf dead end. This is another one of those puzzles similar to the treasure chests we went through in Jolly Roger Bay. If you hit the books in the right order, you'll create a secret passage that'll take you to the Batcave. I wish. Instead, it'll take you to the Power Star. Next up is the Red Coin Star. As per usual, this is your chance to really get intimate with the level design and figure out all the intricate little secrets. The coins are hidden with the extra hint of haunted trolling too, which is just a treat. One of them will require you to face the evil piano and get it to chase you so that it reveals the coin behind it. A couple of them will be hidden on top of bookshelves, another is hidden on top of the red mesh and it might blend in just enough that you'll miss it. There's one right next to a giant trapdoor that you might not spot that'll drop you down to the lower level, and 2 of them will strangely enough be hidden below some coffins that will suddenly rise up when you walk past them. It's all about trickery in Big Boo's Haunt. Made even funnier if you decide to spend time looking outside or in the basement because there is nothing there. A fitting scavenger hunt for a fitting haunted mansion. Your reward is the next star, which requires you to find your way to Big Boo's balcony. The only hint here is that it's a balcony. You need to climb. So you'll spend a bunch of time searching through the mansion in hopes to find a way to move up. By this point though, the stage starts to remind me of the obscure puzzles in Super Mario World whenever you enter the haunted house. In those stages, you have to enter and exit the correct doors with P-switches to find the secret exits. Here, those secrets are the objective. The star will make you enter all of the rooms and look up in hopes of finding any sign of upwards traversal. In one of the rooms, you might notice a platform that seemingly goes nowhere, but if you get on top of it, you'll see a landing overhead. At that point, it's as simple as following the path upwards, finding yet another Big Boo, and defeating it for a power star. Once again, it is a repeated fight, but the actual challenge here is the search, not the fight. Your final star is called Eye to Eye in the secret room. The title of this star doesn't really help, and it's one of those more obscure objectives for this stage. And considering most of the stars in the stage are already obscure, this one is really going to put your detective skills to the test. At one point or another, you might notice this invisible blue block in this level, and hopefully you'll realize that you haven't really done anything with the invisible cap yet, so you'll start to experiment. This is assuming, of course, that you've already unlocked the blue vanish cap. If so, you'll probably have figured out that you can head through the various boo paintings in the same way the other boos have been drifting through them. At which point you also might recall that on your way up to the rooftop there was another boo painting in the 3rd floor. Behind that painting there's a giant eye waiting for you. You'll have to spin around it a number of times to defeat it, and with the eye destroyed you can now collect the 6th power star. Realistically, this star will probably require a guide on the first time playthrough. Or maybe it's a lot simpler than I think it is, I'm not sure. But I know for certain it's one of the last stars I ever figured out how to get way back when I first played this game. Ultimately, despite the fact that this stage has many redundant aspects to it, I don't think any of the stars are really all that redundant when you actually play through them. And I think they're all better done by being dropped at the start of the stage. Hear me out. The first one has you explore the main floor. The second one expects you to go to the basement, but not everyone will know that you can get down there by falling. So they're better off going to the starting point and heading in through the outdoor shed entrance. Third star is a hunt for the books on the 2nd floor, which I guess you could start from the 2nd floor to look for. But again, part of the design of this stage, and this game really, is to search for the stars. The bookshelf isn't a visible obstacle like the chain chomp is in Bob-omb Battlefield, for example, so you should be looking for it from the start of the stage in the same way you should be looking for the following red coin star from the start of the stage. Big Boo's balcony and Eye to Eye could be considered redundant since they both require you to find the 3rd floor. But like I just discussed, you don't know that they're both up there, so it's not even necessarily an advantage to stay on that floor, because a player might get the star on the balcony and work their way all the way back to the bottom again and work their way back up to find it. Also, if a player gets a star without having unlocked the blue vanish cap, then it doesn't really matter which star you get before, you're going to have to exit the stage regardless. Remember, the assumption here isn't that you already know the whole stage. The whole point of me keeping tabs on how redundant some of these stars are is to better understand just how terrible it is that the game sends you back to the beginning of the stage whenever you collect a star. And for the most part, I haven't found it to be terrible in more than a handful of instances. The locations of most of these stars is somewhat of a specific task or objective that the player will have to figure out. So even if they're within the vicinity of another star, if that star isn't overtly visible, the player might not even realize they're right next to it, and that alone could be frustrating when searching for the star. This isn't Mario Odyssey where you get a whole map that tells you exactly where the areas of all the stars are. You have to figure it out, and being sent back to the beginning of the stage is a good way for a new player to reorient themselves as they explore and discover more of the challenge. Otherwise, what benefit would it be to start an objective on Big Boo's balcony if I don't realize that Eye to Eye in the secret room is next to me? So I'll have to jump down to start my search of the mansion regardless. Does that make sense? I hope so. Leading up to this stage, I said 6 out of the 28 stars do fall into the category where it felt like a redundant waste of time. So now, with Boo stage included, that would be 6 out of 35 stars. And oh yeah, there are coins everywhere in the stage. Red, blue, yellow, enemies all around. Yellow blocks that'll drop a bunch for you. This stage may put you through the ringer when it comes to exploration and puzzle solving, but the 100 coin star is very forgiving. And simply put, this is the easiest 100 coin star challenge you'll face in the entire game. But that's it for the old haunted mansion. We can now leave the courtyard, because L is not real, and 24 is not 01. Next, we'll have to tackle one of the more difficult stages in the game, Hazy Maze Cave. I'm probably starting to sound like a broken record by now, but I really don't understand why Hazy Maze Cave is considered the 6th course. I understand that everyone's playthrough order will vary just a bit, but in the case of these basement stages, most people will naturally jump into the lava painting since that's the first thing they'll see. But whatever, I'll keep it in listed order for consistency purposes. The stage is true to its name. It's a maze in a cave, and it's hazy. I mean, even if you ever just looked at a map for this stage, it's easily one of, if not the most complex layouts. Even the entrance is weird. Rather than entering into a painting, there's a weird goop on the floor that you're meant to jump into. There's a general circular route that you can maneuver through by going either right or left at the start, and at the end of the circuit, you can technically end back in the starting area, although you'll realistically find a star before making it back there. I can tell you from now, due to the way the stage is laid out, there will be a handful of stars here that make it to the list of redundancies because you're sent back to the beginning of the level. And this is perhaps the first stage where I might be able to argue almost all of the stars should keep you in the stage, and it's in a player's best benefit to do so. The maze has multiple different landmarks that will be pretty memorable, but since the layout is more complex here, I think it's better to discuss those landmarks as you would pass through them, rather than give you a general overlay. First off, as with many other areas in the game, the aesthetic and atmosphere here is spot on. This is a difficult stage, and you'll feel it as soon as you enter. It's not cheerful, nor does it give you uneasy vibes because it's in an ocean or a haunted house. Rather, it plops you down into a serious stage, and you will quickly note how serious everything is throughout. And if players don't sense that seriousness, they quickly will as soon as they start looking for the first star and inevitably get lost. There are minimal maps in the stage that someone could try and make sense of, but as you traverse through the stage, you'll realize there's quite a bit of thinking to do through most of it. And matters are made worse because the very first star of the stage is one that you'll have to search for in the deepest depths of the cave. You have to find the swimming beast in the cavern, aka Dory, whom I always used to call Swimming Blue Yoshi. A player will have an immediate fork in the road in front of them when they begin the stage. One direction will have them dodging enemies and holes in the ground, and the other will require a long jump over a bottomless pit. But all in all, either route you take will be of similar difficulty, and both can technically get you around the map. I always favor the long jump, so we'll move that way. As soon as you make it across, you'll find that you're in a giant room with boulders everywhere. There are multiple exits in this room, and you have to be careful not to fall in the middle or you'll lose a life. The first door on your route will actually lead you to the same room you would have gone if you had just gone to the right at the start of the course. And the second door will take you to a deeper and more streamlined hazy maze with poisonous gas around you. The third route from the big room with the boulders will take you along a path where you'll have to dodge boulders and ultimately lead to a door. This is the path you'd want to take, because opposite of that door is a platform elevator that'll take you down into the depths. Now, keep in mind, that all sounds very simple when I break it down that way. But if a player decided to move to the right, they'd be stuck in a giant room. We'll revisit that room when we want the red coins. And as they search that area, they'll likely end up in a poisonous gas area, followed by most likely finding an exit that'll take them back into the big room. I realize most of you understand what a maze is and how that works, but I think it's important to break this all down because it is not uncommon for a player that doesn't have a map in front of them to spend upwards of 20 minutes per star if they can't get their bearings around where everything is in this stage. And because of how complex everything is, and how you don't know where every star is until you find it, this could easily end up being the longest stage in the entire game. First-time players may give up without getting a single star and not return to the stage unless they're going for full completion. It's that kind of complex. Regardless, when you do eventually make it to the elevator room and drop down to the lowest depths of the cave, a quick swim to Dory will help lead you to a star. Of course, you'll have to figure out that ground pounding and bringing down her head will allow you to stand on top of it and steer her based off the direction you're facing, but that's all part of the puzzle-solving mystery here. You'll notice there are also 2 additional routes in this room, however, and this is, right off the bat, the first instance where I actually have an issue with returning to the hub world after collecting a star. The door ahead will lead you to a secret area that unlocks the green metal cap. So now, not only did you have to go through this maze to figure out how to get to the first star, I hope you memorize how you made it here, because you have to do it all again to get the metal cap. That, in and of itself, for most stages, isn't that big of a deal for me, but because this one is much more complex and you'll probably already be spending way too much time in here already, this is a horrible, unintentional punishment. After you unlock the metal cap, there will be a green box for you to collect the metal cap from next to the elevator and a switch near the bottom where Dory is that will open the next path in the watery area. There you will be able to collect star number 3 for this stage, Metalhead Mario Can Move. And again, due to how complex the stage is, and how much time you'll spend figuring out this location, it feels like an unintentional punishment to force players to come here 2 or even 3 times because there's so much more of the stage to explore, and this cavern is off the main path, so why continue to force players to come here? Moving back to star number 2 is the red coin star, titled Elevate for 8 red coins. There's only one room here that has the red coins, so hopefully you'll notice them up top when you enter the room. They're up above you, hence the elevate, and as you climb up there will be some Dance Dance Revolution looking platforms that you can use to get Mario around. I think this red coin star is pretty hated, but I actually like the challenge it provides. It's less of a scavenger hunt and more of a test of the patience and control of Mario. As long as you're up there long enough and you're careful and you do your due diligence, you'll be able to succeed. The issue I imagine most people have is that if you fall down, you'll have to get back up there again and maneuver the slow elevator platforms all over again. But I think that's part of the frustrating charm of this objective. It's less about searching and more about overcoming the challenge. This is a very memorable star in the game for me, and one that I was very proud to accomplish. Star number 4 is titled Navigating the Toxic Maze. By now, a player will realistically be comfortable enough to reach the Toxic Maze room. Experimental players might even realize that the green cap will allow Mario to avoid damage from the poisonous gas. But there's a bit of an issue here. You'll run around the toxic cave and won't be able to find a star anywhere. I can't be the only one that was so frustrated by this. The anxiety of Mario losing his health and me going after every enemy in the room hoping one of them will give away a star. Man, Hazy Maze Cave is just such an annoying level. Like, I can feel what I felt the first time playing it almost 30 years ago. It's crazy that even the frustration leads me to nostalgia. In any case, at some point, if you're looking long enough, you'll notice a hidden elevated platform you can backflip onto, and it'll take you up and through the door and into the room that has the power star. Star 5 and 6 are equally as hidden and annoying. Number 5 is titled Amazing Emergency Exit. I'm not sure why, it's found at the very top of the room with the falling boulders, but you actually won't know that until you go on a hunt around the stage. When you enter the toxic gas area, there's a simpler exit that will lead you to a platform that'll bring you to the top of the room with the boulders, and the star can be reached by monkey barring across the red mesh. It's a horribly named star because it doesn't really provide hints, but it's very much a star that requires searching all over the stage. Star number 6 is at least better named. Watch for falling rocks. If you consider the rolling boulders are falling rocks, it's pretty easy to figure this one out. But it will take some wall jumping and exploration to find out how to get up there. It's comfortably hidden, but you should be able to find it eventually if you're curious enough. All that would be left now is the 100 coin star. Oh man, this is easily a top 3 worst mission in the game. The stage is large and spread out, and it's a maze. If you haven't memorized the layout, good luck. There are so many death traps too. You might have to restart after collecting 70 or 80 coins. Even the blue coin box is one of those annoying ones that won't easily just lay out the blue coins for you. You'll have to actually work for them. The red coins are obnoxious too and will require a whole load of time to collect them to help you get to the 100 coins. Everything is just so spread out that you're almost certainly likely to face 1 or 2 stupid deaths and have to start over. I remember I reached 100 coins while monkey barring on the mesh when I was younger, and when the star spawned, it was on top of the mesh. And before I could grab it, I fell down and lost my life. And actually, I'm pretty sure you can't even get on top of the mesh. This is a super frustrating mission. It's one that only the most diehard and stubborn of fans will complete. It's not impossible, I won't even go as far as to say it's a bad inclusion in the game, but damn do they make you work for it. But this course in general feels like that. You have to search, you have to find everything, and even if you do find the stars, they're not really all that simple to grab. There are too many locations you'll have to frequently revisit and relearn the locations of the map. So many different doors that lead to different areas. Strangely enough, the more you run through this map, the more confusing it becomes. It's not even like there's a benefit of reorienting yourself when you get a star, because you might have just gone through 7 different doors until you ended up in the right location of where the last star was. The 2 stars in the cave below plus the green cap means you return to that cavern too many times, and there's just no real intrinsic or extrinsic benefit of doing so. 1 time is plenty, so that's 1 star so far. When you get to the red coins on top of the map, there's no real reason or benefit to return to the start of the stage because you're already moving along the path of the course, so that's 2 stars. And then you basically have 2 stars in the location of the poison gas. One of them takes you to a dead end, so I can see the benefit of it sending you back to the start. But the other one just puts you on top of the main boulder room, and there's really no need to exit the stage at that point. So that's 3 stars. And the one with the falling boulders is literally right along your path, so being sent back to the start is a waste of time. So that's 4 out of the 7 stars in the stage that I think are actually worse off because it sends you back to the beginning. In Jolly Roger Bay, when it was 3 stars that I said the redundancy was felt, that was largely because of how painstakingly slow it felt to move Mario. You could maybe argue, if you enjoy swimming, that those 3 stars might not be so redundant to get kicked out of the stage for. In the case of Hazy Maze Cave, there was almost no benefit of being sent back to the beginning, because restarting the course is actually worse for the player. You're still lost, you're still searching, you're still going back to the same area, and by the end of it all, heading back to the beginning of the stage doesn't really offer you any assistance since you're frequently and confusingly running through the same path. In Boo's Haunt, that wasn't as much of an issue because for the most part that stage was less confusing and the paths to the stars were often linear and led to an endpoint where it was in your benefit to be sent back to the beginning before looking for the next star. But here, it's like being sent back to a specific point at the bottom of a circle and being required to continue to go around that circle to the same area with the slightest of differences. Once or twice, I can forgive as learning the stage, especially when it comes to something more linear like Whomp's Fortress with its 2 paths side by side. But due to the complex nature of Hazy Maze Cave, the ease of which a player can lose a life, the reality that you'll probably get lost starting from the very first star, so you're already probably going to be seeing most of the map earlier on, and just by nature of how confusing and repetitive many of the stars in the stage are, I think, hands down, so far, this is the one stage where someone could make a long list of complaints about how terrible Mario 64 is, explicitly because you're sent back to the beginning of the hub world after every star. The mechanic just doesn't lend itself well here at all. I can yield that. I say 4 of the stars, but if you made an argument that all 6 of them shouldn't send you back, I could see a case for it. But I'm sticking with my number because I think one of the cave stars and the star at Caged Off Dead End after the poison gas are in the benefit of the player to return to the beginning of the stage. So we're at 10 out of 42 stars now that I feel like are redundant or worse off because Mario gets sent back to the hub world after collecting stars. Regardless, despite this jarring issue, I can't say I hate this stage. It's difficult, but it's a difficulty I enjoy, and it's very memorable as a result. This stage is great for a final challenge, and I have to imagine most first-time players will quickly leave it on the back burner and only return to it later on when they want to go for full completion, which is yet another highlight of how good they nailed the dynamic of progression through this title, so that people of all skill levels can enjoy it. And now it's time to leave the maze behind us. and we're gonna head towards the fiery depths of Lethal Lava Land. As is pretty typical of pretty much every Mario game since the dawn of time, you'll eventually have to go through a fire stage. Normally, the fire stages are in the endgame, or at least be tied to Bowser. But in the case of Lethal Lava Land, nope, it's just a regular stage front and center when you enter the narrow corridors of the basement of Peach's castle. I always liked the painting they used for the stage too. They could have stuck with a Podoboo, but no, they went for the lava lantern Halloween-esque look. It's super eerie and actually kind of hilarious how it has nothing to do with both with the stage nor with Mario in general. Like, this isn't a bad guy in the stage, nor does it ever appear again. But anyway, new to Mario in Mario 64 is the damage that you take when you touch the fire. In the 2D games, touching the fire was the equivalent of falling into a bottomless pit and meant instant death. But in the wonderful world of 3D Mario, it's a loss of health and if you're lucky, a quick bounce back to solid ground. As players get better, they can take advantage of the way Mario interacts with the fire and find a way to skip through certain areas or to avoid going through enemies or platforming challenges and just take the hit on the health to advance. Sort of like damage boosting, or so to speak. It's a fun bit of gimmicky physics you could screw around with and treat as part of Mario's moveset, but really the intention was that it would be a way to punish the player without fully forcing them to start over. So if the lava was to get you instant death, it would be way too difficult to expect a player to succeed without losing their mind. Due to the nature of this course, the layout is actually very straightforward. It's all floating platforms on a generally flat land that you can platform across, while occasionally hearing Mario do his laugh-sounding scream because it burnt his buttocks. It's also an extremely straightforward level due to the simplicity. And I would say if you're comfortably able to control Mario, it's probably one of the quickest levels you'll run through in this game, minus the forced slowdown times in the last 2 stars, and I'll get there shortly. The first star is easy enough. It's titled Boil the Big Bully. Carefully traverse your way to the back of the map and you'll run into a big cannonball-looking enemy known as a bully. You'll pass by a few smaller bullies on the way there, and basically these guys will beeline it towards you and it'll put you in a bit of a sumo wrestling match where you'll have to punch and kick them. The one at the back of the map will just be a bigger bully, so they can hit harder and just take a little bit more to push off. The second star is the same idea, titled Bully the Bullies, only this time you'll have to defeat the little bullies first to summon the big bully. The platform is also at the back of the map, but the stage is small enough where I don't think this is really that big of an issue because there are multiple routes to get back there. So I think it's a good chance for a player to experiment with the routes and realistically end up near the platform again. The fight is redundant, but it's redundant in the same way the booth fights were redundant in Haunted Mansion, where the fight is just the final objective, but the actual value and the challenge of the stage is being able to maneuver around without dying in the fire and making it to these platforms. The third star is the 8 red coin star titled 8 coin puzzle with 15 pieces. It'll probably be the easiest to spot, but there's one of those sliding puzzles with Bowser on it that has 15 pieces. All of the red coins are on there, and there should be no challenge here to collect the red coins and grab the star. It's very easy. Red Hot Log is probably the hardest challenge in that there's an area hidden away in the corner of the map that you either have to take a long moving platform towards, or heck, you can even take a flying cap if you figure out where that is too. Either way, you make your way there to the general vicinity and have to balance upon a rolling log to make it towards the platform and pick up the star. This is the most challenging star, and might seem intimidating to grab at first, but it's a very easy to grab once you understand how to get around the stage. Stars 5 and 6 both take place inside the volcano in the center of the map, titled Hot-Foot It into the Volcano and Inside the Volcano, respectively. There are 2 routes in the volcano. One is to the right and one is to the left. As you can imagine, each route leads to a single star. The one on the left puts you through platforming challenges where you have to dodge enemies and fire. The one on the right is mostly about patience because you're riding an elevator and figuring out when to jump from platform to platform. It's almost like an auto-scroller. Each path offers a different type of challenge, but because both of which are fairly easy to get through, at the end of each path you're better off being sent back to the beginning of the stage because it's a dead end. So although it may seem like the stage is unforgiving by kicking you out, it's probably in your benefit because you want to start at the beginning of the volcano, which again is easier to run into from the starting point. Plus, if you die while in the volcano, the game will automatically start you over from inside the volcano, which is a nice bonus. But I don't think that's that big of a deal because entering the volcano is pretty easy and takes very little time. But like I said, the map and layout and challenges here are all pretty simple. It's just on you to get used to all of the physics of the different platforms you're standing on. But it should take you no time at all to figure out how to get around. And because it's just a big grid, there are a few different routes that I don't even know how beneficial it is to not be sent back to the start before every star. The red coins, for example, are to the left of the starting point. The log star is all the way on the right and closer to the starting point. The two in the volcano end at different areas, so you're better off starting again from the foot of the volcano and taking the other route rather than trying to do some crazy long jump leap of faith to nab them, both from the top of the volcano. Maybe the two bully fights can be considered redundant, but I think their location is fine because those are realistically the only two stars you'll not immediately know where to go, and they're just far enough where two separate routes can be taken to reach each one of them and give the player a chance to learn the course. And like I said, this is a very easy and very flat stage, so even if there was a waste of time of being sent back to the beginning of the stage, I don't think realistically it's all that obnoxious because once you're able to maneuver around the fire, which will realistically happen pretty quickly, you'll be able to get through this level with ease fairly soon, with maybe only the 2 stars in the volcano giving any semblance of a true challenge. So I think I'm going to say in total we're still at 10 stars out of the 49 so far that feel like you're worse off by being sent back to the start of the stage. But thankfully the challenge in the stage is in the coin collection. And I think this is one of the most enjoyably difficult coin collecting stars in the game. You'll need to surf all around the stage to collect as many stars as you can, which is all fun and good until you bump into a wall because you missed the slope from how fast you were going. A wing cap could help, but because the stage is so flat, it could be detrimental to try and land. Killing all the bullies you can to get the coins from them will absolutely drain you since they take so much time and have minimal reward. And even if you're able to collect every coin, defeat every bully, spare every hit of health, and survive, you're going to have to head inside the volcano as well and continue to reach your 100 coin target, which will just add more risks of losing your life and having to start the count over. I think there are still 3 or 4 stages more difficult than this one when it comes to the coin collection. Hazy Maze Cave is one of them. But this is the only one of the stages where everything else here genuinely feels like very level 1 stuff. Again, dying by getting burnt while going for any of the stars is hardly punishment because it's a pretty easy map to make up that time and distance lost on repeated life. You might even get a game over, but it doesn't really matter because when you get back in there, you'll just have to patiently jump through the small platforms to collect the stars. This stage is somewhat of a noob trap. The first time in there, you can see all the fire and it can feel very intimidating. But once you learn how to control Mario on the varying platforms and avoid touching the lava, or better yet, once you know how to manipulate Mario's reaction to actually touching the lava, this becomes one of the easiest stages to overcome. But all of that advantage goes out of the window when a simple screw-up can mean having to restart a coin collection. It's an interesting dynamic because the swing of difficulty from collecting stars to collecting coins is probably larger than any other stage in this game, and that alone makes the stage pretty unique. But anyway, I'll always remember this stage as the first time I heard Mario scream laugh because his butt was on fire. I'm not sure if anyone else used to refer to it as a laugh, that was probably just my family, but his painful cry always sounded more like a humorous laugh, kind of like when you foolishly hurt yourself and are laughing despite being in so much pain. The grabbing of the butt and flying through the air or maniacally running across the platform was just a bonus. It was just so memorable for us. Oh, and the Bowser puzzle for the red coins is just so out of the place that I can't help but smirk at the thought of one of the game designers casually deciding to implement it. And also, Bowser objectively looks better in the puzzle than his in-game model does. By a long shot. He's actually hideous in this game. But I digress. I think this is my shortest segment thus far, and that probably says more about the stage than anything else I could really say. I like the stage, but it's also one of the easiest ones and probably should have been a level 1 stage rather than something paired next to Hazy Maze Cave and the next basement stage, Shifting Sandland. So let's head over to the desert and discuss that one. Shifting Sandland is the next elemental theme stage in the game. It's kind of funny because due to the new and experimental designs of the stage in the Nintendo 64, it has many themes that are shared across most 2D and 3D games for that matter, but they sort of lack the Mushroom Kingdom charm that we're used to in other games. At least they do for me. There's a weird sense of realism in Mario 64 that makes it stand out a bit. I guess by realism I mean it's much less cartoony than the remaining Mario games. And I wonder if that was intentional as part of their transition to 3D, or if it just happened like that. Anyway, the reason I say that is because although we've had the grassland, snow level, water level, fire level, and now the sand level, they actually lack the typical Mario charm. They still have a charm, and we'll call it the Mario 64 charm. Like when you start off in the desert stage here, you get a weird tune that sounds like it would take place in an old western film if it was somehow filmed in Egypt. The same way you felt immersed in the snow, water, fire, and haunted stages, you feel completely immersed here in the desert. This is another fairly open sandbox too. Pun intended. In that it doesn't really have a primary path that most people would follow like some of the earlier stages. There's a lot more going on here than the lava stage. You'll start off in what I'll refer to as the beginning area where you'll have to run around a large sand dune. There will be a concrete platform that you'll have to use some strategy to get on top of. You'll turn and see a tornado not too far ahead of you. On the ground, you'll notice little quicksand tornadoes. If you get stuck in there, you'll have to mash the jump button to get out. Towards the right, you'll notice a minor maze with blocks flipping through it. The sand there is a different color and almost watery. That is an insta-kill hazard, so as you make your way around the maze-like platforms, you have to be careful not to fall in. The blocks all have a single hollow side that won't crush you, so your puzzle is to find a way to stand in the right location when the block drops down and won't flatten Mario. If you make it past the maze, there will be an oasis and you'll be on the back of the pyramid. As I'm saying this out loud, it makes the stage actually seem like it has a main path, and that's because on foot it kind of does. But the players can also run up these vertical pillars and perform long jumps to land on the pyramid. And then they could try and use the pyramid to take shortcuts through the different areas of the desert. There's also a green surfing shell that you can grab that'll let you surf right over all the sinking sand and up the pyramid without having to use too many ramps to climb up, as well as a wing cap you can fly around with. My point is there are a lot of ways to get around, hence why the stage is fairly wide open. In any case, the first star is titled the Town of the Big Bird. As you run out of the beginning area, with enough speed you can actually run straight up the brick pillars, and you'll notice a buzzard flying around carrying a star. Basically, you'll need to wait for it to fly overhead and quickly attack it, making it drop the power star where it'll wait for you beyond the pyramid. So the first star itself will help you get acquainted with most of the stage and teach you about some of its more intricate details like the ability to climb the pillars. You'll also eventually learn that the buzzard can steal Mario's hat. You don't want that to happen, because if it steals Mario's hat, Mario will... well, he'll have no hat. And nobody wants Mario without a hat, that's just weird. In any case, star number 2 is titled Shining Atop the Pyramid. Find your preferred way to traverse up the pyramid, whether it's the wing cap or shell or more realistically on foot if you're someone that's not quite used to the layout of the stage yet. You might have to jump on an enemy's head that'll help you move up there too. Either way, the pyramid itself has a few platforms you can follow to get up there, but if you put a foot wrong you could easily slip off and before you know it you could be sucked down into the sinking sand and get a game over. Star number 3 is where the fun really starts. It's titled Inside the Ancient Pyramid. Similar to the volcano in Lava Land, entering the pyramid takes you into basically a whole new stage. The same rules apply here too. Once you're in until you get a game over or find the star. Because if you lose a life, you'll respawn inside the pyramid again. It's a giant room, mostly with paths around the outside. Basically, a player will have to continue to run around and find different ways to climb up the inside of the pyramid in order to make it towards a star. It's not much of a puzzle, but it is a challenge and will require cartwheels, triple jumps, and even quick timing to dodge obstacles that can and will make your life living hell. Or, just cause you to fall all the way down and have to restart the climb. This is actually a pretty intense challenge the first time, and it's super mysterious too, because it's such a large area and will really put your platforming and control of Mario to the test. Otherwise, you're going to spend a whole lot of time repeating most of the stage. Regardless, you should realistically be able to get through it despite the increase in difficulty, and it's a good challenge, I'd say. Plus, it's super rewarding when you make it to the top and nab the star. The next star is titled Stand Tall on the 4 Pillars. Obviously enough, those are the 4 brick pillars that were surrounding the pyramid. The problem is, in order to run up the pillar, you have to be able to pick up speed, and one of the pillars is conveniently placed in the middle of the quicksand, so you can't really run up there. Once you touch the top of all 4 pillars, a mysterious melody will play and the roof of the pyramid will come off, and there will be a new access point directly on top of the pyramid for you to enter, and you end up against one of the most unique boss fights in the game. I always called these stone hands, but apparently they're known as the I Rock. I'm pretty sure boss fights against giant hands were their own subgenre at one point. Either way, this is such a cool secret boss fight. The puzzle to move to the top of the pyramid, the strange mystic fists you're facing off against. I swear the first experience of this game is so absurdly unnatural, and I'm not sure if that's because I associate this game with the easiness to be wowed as a child, or if it was actually as surreal as I remember. I'm leaning towards the latter since so many people are always commenting on the strange mystery of Mario 64, and how it's apparently messed with people's memories or whatever. I don't know, Google it. But after you beat the fists, you get the star, and the next star in the stage is free flying for 8 red coins. Thankfully, all the coins are outside. The game even hints to you that the red cap will help you grab them, although it's not required to have the red cap for half of them. One of them is straight up behind you at the start of the stage, and you'll only figure that out if you're curious enough to move backwards when you first spawn. One of them is on the concrete platform near the beginning, another is on the maze over the quicksand, one is out by the back of the pyramid in the water, and the last 4, well, those are the ones that you need the wing cap for. Once again, this serves as a bit of a litmus test. If you want the star, you'll have to learn how to control Mario's unconventional flight patterns. And if you're willing to take the time to do so, it'll make more and more flight stars throughout the game easier to nab. Assuming, of course, you haven't already mastered the flight in other stages already, since once again this game is non-linear and everyone's experience and optimal routes taken will vary to large degrees. Regardless, This isn't the worst scavenger hunt for the 8 red coins, but it is one with a respectable difficulty and a good test of your ability to search and survive throughout the hazardous stage. The last star is Pyramid Puzzle. We can probably file this star with a select group of stars that more than likely will be the last 10 or 15 stars you need to get full completion, and one that you more than likely needed a guide or the help of a friend to figure out. It's such an obscurely titled star, and honestly, it's not even really a puzzle. At the very least, they could have called it Inside the Pyramid Puzzle so that you know it was inside the pyramid. I'm sure most people figured that out at least, but it could have been easily assumed to be outside the pyramid. But anyway, when you go inside the pyramid, you'll probably spend a whole lot of time searching everywhere, on every floor, and work your way up along the same path as you did earlier towards the star on the top. Only you'll be going much slower since you're searching everything. Right before you make it to the star, you'll notice a gap in the wall and the platform you're walking onto next to the sand pouring downwards. You also likely might not notice anything at all. Or you might be someone that luckily fell down. I'm not sure. But if you take a leap of faith off the wall or use your close quarters camera and peek below, you'll find a coin on the platform that might pique your interest. If you drop down, you'll see a counter that says 1. Peek again, you'll find another coin and it says 2. Keep following the flowing sand and peeking and you might grab the third one. One more drop onto a channel carrying sand, and if you're able to center yourself and balance, you'll be able to collect the 4th and 5th coin too, which will place a star along your path, so make sure you remain focused and grab it, lest you'll have to climb all the way back up again. I really like the challenge for the star actually, but I don't like its obscurity at all. And I think the fact that you have to go all the way back up where star 3 was to get it is extremely tasteless. That spot might literally be the last place any player searches, both inside and outside of the pyramid, and even then they might get there and miss it altogether. I think star 6 gets a strike against it for being kicked out of the stage, or rather, getting kicked out of the stage after grabbing star 3 might be the actual culprit here. Basically, only one of these pyramid stars should kick you out. Red coins, boss fight, star on top of the pyramid, and the talent of the bird star I don't mind too much because I think for all of those you're better off starting from the beginning of the stage so you can figure out how to get around the stage optimally to succeed. And also, after grabbing a star behind or on top of the pyramid, if I don't know where the next star is, I much rather start back at the beginning of the stage, otherwise I could easily die trying to get through the hazardous paths. I believe that puts us at 11 stars now after the 56 total in the game so far that are made worse because you're kicked out of the stage, while the remaining are either just the same or better, as they are, because it's easier or more beneficial to you to actually experience the different stages and their routes. Also, this is roughly the halfway point since we're through 8 stages out of the 15. 11 out of the 56 stars is like 1 in every 5 stars you'll have collected in the stages. Obviously, the coin star doesn't kick you out at all, and that's included in the 56, but 11 out of the 48 is still pretty close to 20%. For 6 out of the 8 stages, there's a maximum of 1 star that is made worse because you're kicked out after collecting the stars. And honestly, it's usually the last star in those stages, which you'll only really be going for if you're aiming for full completion, so most players won't even go through that. Jolly Roger Bay and Hazy Maze Cave alone hold 7 out of the 11 of those stars. So basically for the first 8 stages of the game, which is more than half of the stages, only 2 stages are actually that much worse off because of the mechanic that sends you back to the hub world. And even then, it's only half of those 2 stages. I'm assuming that number is going to increase as we move out of the basement and head upstairs in Peach's castle, but I just thought it was worth highlighting how blown out of proportion this whole thing is considering this is more than half of the entire game. And I guess since we're at the halfway point, I'll also remind everyone that I could agree that an optional text to go back to the hub world or starting point can be very beneficial. I'm not saying the way they implemented it in Mario 64 is the ideal. I'm just trying to shed a different light on the criticism that has become such a major talking point, despite the fact that it's hardly even that egregious of an aspect of the game when you're playing it for the first time. Since even if you time the 30 to 45 seconds tops it takes to collect the star, get kicked out, and jump back into the painting, the benefit of that being at the start of the course alone will more often than not save more time than those seconds. Agreed? I hope so, because I still have 7 more stages to go, so I'm hoping we're on the same page here. Anyway, I didn't discuss the coin collecting star. I could probably do a whole video on this alone. This is by far the absolute worst stage to collect 100 coins in, and that is primarily because there are so few coins to collect, and so many ways to die. Think of the enemies you have to defeat, the red coins you have to grab, the hazards you have to avoid to collect whatever you can, and the fact that you have to jump into the pyramid and make your way around there while trying to avoid all of the dozens of ways you could be forced to lose a life and start over. Like you can fall into quicksand and die. You can slip off the side of the pyramid and die. You can accidentally fly into a brick pillar and die. It's just so tedious and frustrating. I hate this star, with a passion. Stupid buzzards. This 100 coin collection star is so obnoxious that I'm inclined to not include my general caveat of the reward of collecting the coins being all the more worth it. This is basically one of those dumb difficulty spikes. those retro game bottlenecks. So fine, when you do get the star, y'all probably jump up and scream with joy. I know I did. Heck, I still do, because it's still a pain in the mustache. So let's move on. This is a good stage with probably 2 really bad stars, and I'd be lying if I said I don't look forward to taking the stage on as a whole whenever I play the game. But now that it's complete, we've finished all the stages in the basement. Well, almost all of them, because next up is another one with an obscure entrance. Dire Dire Docks. I like Dire Dire Docks. I just felt the need to say that because it's the second water stage in the game and I gave the first one a pretty hard time. Honestly, I might just like it more because it's not as big or as dark as Jolly Roger Bay, so it doesn't annoy me as much. When a player is ready to face off against a second Bowser, there'll be a weird jelly goop blocking the entrance. That goop is the entry point to Dire Dire Docks. The stage is made up of 2 locations with an underwater tunnel connection between them. The first star is titled Board Bowser's Sub. You'll basically just swim to the other area across the tunnel and find Bowser's Doom Ship floating above the water. This will be the only time the Doom Ship appears, even if you repeat the first star later on, which is kind of cool, because after you get the first star you can access a second Bowser stage, so I suppose the implication is that this is the ship that he took to get there and then he disappeared? I'm not sure. It's even weirder because this is a water level and the second Bowser stage is all fire, but that's besides the point. When you're in the area of the stage with the Doom Ship, you'll notice around the outside of the walls there's some floors that you can stand on. In that area you'll also notice a switch that will make some temporary blocks appear. You have a time limit now to run across the blocks and make it to the ship. Board the Doom Ship, collect a star, say goodbye to said ship, and move on. Star number 2 is titled Chests in the Current. If you dive down you'll notice 4 chests. You'll have to open them in a specific order like we've done in a few other instances before now. The hardest chest is the one near the whirlpool, as getting sucked in there will make you lose a life, so you have to be extra careful. But regardless, it's an easy star to nab, and it's in the main area of the pool too, so you don't really have to do too much swimming. Star number 3 is pole jumping for the red coins. Basically, you swim back to the area where the ship was, only this time, surprise surprise, the ship is no longer there. Instead, when you hit the switches to get up to the blocks that appear, you'll make your way up to a platform in the sky that will give you access to poles that will slide around the ceiling. Your objective is pretty clear here. Traverse these moving poles and time your jumps so that you can collect the red coins and then grab the star. If you fall, you'll end in the water and have to start all over again, since grabbing the red coins is more or less a linear progression. It's a pretty laid back but somewhat challenging test of your ability to control Mario in this unnatural manner. Star number 4 is Cold Through the Jet Streams. When you swim back to the area where the red coins were, you'll see a jet stream at the bottom of the water. Right off the bat, yes, although this is an easy star, I think coming here for the 3rd time after being sent back to the hub world is a strike against it. I didn't apply the same strike to the red coin star since the ship disappears after the first star, so you'd realistically have to leave the stage anyway. And more than likely after that, most people enter the Bowser stage. You won't be able to grab it since the force of the jet stream is too strong, so you have to work your way back up, grab the metal cap, and head back down there to collect the star. Star number 5 is Manta Ray's Reward. 5 rings you need to swim through, although this one takes place in the same pool as the second star. We'll give it another strike for similar reasons of redundancy because you're kicked back out to the hub world. Actually, come to think of it, star number 2 should also get reprimanded for sending you back to the hub world because you're already in the beginning area. So that's 3 strikes. Anyway, in this area there's a manta ray swimming around and shedding more of those same rings that were coming out of the jet stream. You know the drill. Follow the ray, swim through the rings, the star will appear down below just above the whirlpool, so swim down and grab the star and be careful not to get sucked into the whirlpool. Star number 6 is hidden behind a red mesh cage in the bottom of the area where the ship was. Yeah, another strike. You'll have to swim to the surface and grab the blue cap and then swim back down there to get the star. Now that I'm saying all of this out loud, I think the only reason I like Dire Dire Docks is because it's short, easy, and stress-free. Even the coin collection star. It's probably second only to Big Boo's Haunt when it comes to easy coin collecting missions. There aren't a whole ton of coins in this course, but because it's so small and there are so few intricate areas to hide the coins, it makes it a very easy mission. Honestly, I give this stage 4 strikes, but it's so quick and easy that even though it sends you back to the starting point, I don't see how it can be frustrating. It's not making you redo a whole lot of the platforming or anything. And yeah, the swimming is slow, but it's barely even taking any time to get around the stage. I'll still give the stage the 4 strikes since the redundancy of being thrown out of the stage is explicitly felt, so we're at 15 out of 63 redundant stars. But this stage is so short that I don't think it'll make or break anyone's Mario 64 experience. Regardless, I don't have too much to add on to this one. I'll just say that there are a few swimming moments in this game that aren't really all that obnoxious, including a secret star stage. The water levels can be good if they're done right. I don't know that Dire Docks is necessarily done right, since it's so small and way too easy to really consider anything more than a minor challenge, but Jolly Roger Bay is on the opposite side of the spectrum. There are a couple more levels with water in them though as we move upstairs in the castle, but now that we've finished our second water stage, we get to head to our second snow stage of Snowman's Land. So throw your jackets on and meet me there. Now, I'm not sure why Snowman Land is always the last stage I think of when I discuss Mario 64. Something about it makes it stick out to me the least out of any stage, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't feel like a full 7-star course in this game, even though it clearly is. I wonder if it's because Cool Mountain is predominantly the more appealing snow stage, so it takes up most of my memories? Perhaps I conflate the two stages? I'm not sure. I mean, the stage clearly has multiple unique aspects to it. The water is so cold you'll actually lose health by swimming in there. There's an inside location similar to the lava in the desert stage. There's a big snowman, the hidden area you have to propel to it, and etc. I've memorized this stage the same way I've memorized all the rest, but again, this one just feels like it could have been in Mario Galaxy or something. Anyway, this is yet another stage that doesn't require you to jump into a painting. Which, if you're keeping tabs, that's actually 5 stages so far, and there's 2 more. I always thought it was ironic that we all talk about how Mario 64 is all about jumping into paintings, when nearly half the stages don't even have a painting to jump into. In the case of Snowman's Land, it's another stage hidden in an empty wall. Something I appreciate about the stage is that although you have multiple themes repeated in the stages, they generally tend to stand apart on their own. The 2 water stages so far were different types of settings, and that similarly applies here. While Cool Mountain gives off North Cabin on a ski mountain trip during Christmas vibes, Snowman's Land gives off the feeling of a cold and dark, quiet Midwest winter, the type you don't want to run outside in. It has less of a linear path than Cool Mountain as well, and is more of a semi-open sandbox in the same way Shifting Sand Land is. I say semi-open because I'd consider something like Lethal Lava Land to be fully open. There's still a general direction, but not really a direct path. As per usual, you'll see most of the main part of the stage by simply going to the first star, titled Snowman's Big Head. There's a giant snowman and you gotta get up there. Along your way, there will be wind hazards, ice bullies ready to knock you down, and various other enemies and hazards to catch your attention, and there will be mounds of snow coming out to slow you down. This is mostly a test of your control of the triple jump. You'll have to test your timing and hop, skip, and jump and flip over the highest mound and land atop the base of the snowman. You'll platform your way upwards and eventually find an ice bridge with a penguin on it. The bridge passes in front of the snowman's face and it'll blow a strong gust of wind to knock you back down to the bottom, also potentially causing you to lose your hat. You're meant to hide behind the penguin to get across the bridge safely. After that, you'll need to perform a backflip to get up higher and grab the power star. The second star is Chill with the Bully. Basically, just head to the bully you passed by on your first star and do the same thing you did in Lethal Lava Land to get that star. Star 3 is Deep Freeze and is located in the ice igloo right behind you when you start the stage. For obvious reasons, the Deep Freeze and the Big Bully fight are the first 2 stars most people will usually get, and both of which are annoyingly redundant stars for sending players back to the start of the stage, since they're basically located at the stage's entrance anyway. Star 4 is Whirl from the Freezing Pond. You're meant to head back to the narrow path again, but most players will do some searching in the areas they haven't been to until they figure that out. There are slightly alternate routes you can take to get you to the path over the water, and you have to jump on those propeller enemies and use their location to time your flight and land beyond the wall. When you get back there, the star will be waiting for you in a yellow box. Star 5 is a red coin star. The game gives you a hint in the title. It's called shell shredding for the 8 red coins. The problem is the shell location is right next to star number 4. So you basically have to take the exact same route you took again to grab the shell and then collect the 8 red coins, making this kind of redundant. But in fairness, the actual shell shredding to collect the 8 coins is a fun challenge, and it's a decent scavenger hunt to collect all 8 coins. The final star is Into the Igloo, and once again you're heading back to the same area where the path over the ice water is and head to the green shell so you can use that to get up the ramp and into the igloo. I wouldn't necessarily call this star redundant because the ending location of the previous stars aren't really all that advantageous to grab this one. Maybe the first one? And for the star near the green shell, we already gave the red coin star a strike, and the red coin star ends by the start of the stage. Although saying that out loud, I suppose if the red coin star is at the start of the stage, we probably shouldn't be kicked out. So, fine, another strike. Wow, that's 4 strikes already. I guess this is similar to Dire Docks, where the stage being so small is actually to its detriment, and being sent back to the hub world is significantly more noticeable as a result. That would put us at 19 out of 70 if my count is correct. Remember, these strikes are basically the amount of times that stars are made worse because of the mechanic where you're sent back to the lobby, so even if they're simple and easy stars and it doesn't waste too much time, the strike itself is still applicable. But regardless, when you make it into the igloo, you need to carefully find a way to grab the vanish cap, which will allow you to run through the ice walls to grab the final star. As far as the 100 coin star goes, well, the stage is small, so it's not really all that hard. There are probably like 5 stages easier for one reason or another, but primarily because this one does require you to understand janky aspects of the stage. For instance, you have to be able to grab the shell, so if you crush your propeller dudes and can't make it to the shell, you're kind of out of luck. You need to be able to enter the igloo, so if you do lose the shell, there are some blind leaps of faith to get into the igloo, but I'd almost just recommend restarting the stage because that jump can take a while to figure out. But as long as you do your due diligence, collect what you can before grabbing the shell, and grab your red coins and head inside the igloo, at that point, it's pretty easy to get the 100 coin star. I'd say it's actually a pretty fun challenge anyway, as long as you don't screw up the shell grab too many times and frustrate yourself. But all in all, it's a short-lived stage with maybe 2 or 3 standout aspects and set pieces that make it memorable for me. But otherwise, it's one of the most underwhelming stages whenever I return to this game. But that being said, the final 5 stages are some of the most controversial stages in the game, so it's entirely possible that Snowman's Land just gets lost in their controversy. You'll see what I mean, because up next is Wet Dry World. Wet Dry World is, in my opinion, one of the best open sandbox stages created in the history of 3D Mario. I'm not sure what the public discourse is about the stage, but this stage pretty much has everything I could ask for. And it's made up of so many different notable traits and gimmicks that exist throughout the game. It's genuinely challenging, contains puzzle-solving elements, has hidden secrets, is wide open with various paths leading to different areas, and actually balances out a lot of the confusing elements in regards to collecting the star with a surprisingly easy 100 coin collecting mission to round off the stage. There's a secret area that does take some time to figure out how to reach, and the objectives in that area are quite unique. Genuinely, I think this stage takes all of the negative aspects of Hazy Maze Cave and turns it into a wide open maze light, so to speak. Where rather than a confusing map with walls and doors, you have a primary gimmick that involves rising and lowering the water level around the stage in order to reach certain locations that you would otherwise be able to spot, even if you were at the wrong water level. For this reason, some of the stars, or at least their locations, are fairly easy to figure out just by looking around the stage. The objective now falls on you to solve the puzzle and learn how to grab the star. I'm not exaggerating when I say the puzzle-solving element of this stage might rival some of the best Zelda dungeons. But the difference is, when you run through the stage, you're still very much going through the typical action platforming and collecting challenges that you would experience in an action platforming collectathon. Honestly, just the fact that there's a lot of swimming in the stage and I didn't immediately start off by complaining about it should be noted. And I'll shortly get into deeper details about the stars themselves, but given that the stage has 2 different large areas, they even separated 2 different coin collecting missions, so that at some point or another you'll have to traverse through the whole map to really enjoy the search and collect aspects of this glorious, large sandbox. Most sandbox stages are a big square. This one, in many ways, is more like a cube. But you're not really as crippled because of that z-axis verticality, because simultaneously everything is wide open and the star hints do a pretty decent job directing you around the stage. Now, a player might not figure this out immediately, but the stage is unique in that depending on how high or low you jump into the painting, the water level in the stage will likewise be higher or lower. There are 5 different uniquely colored switches spread throughout the map at various elevations. Those switches will bring the water level to their elevations. So even if you jump into the painting at the wrong height, you should still be able to maneuver around to your heart's content. Part of the way this game helps you discover that secret at the entry point is the painting on the wall in front of you is very large. A player might not notice the water level corresponds to how low they jumped on the first entry as they ran towards the painting from afar, but they might figure it out on the second or third time where they might re-enter the stage and see the water level slightly higher or lower when they entered prior because they jumped from closer into the painting after being sent out into the hub world. So their re-entry and the way they jump into the painting will vary because they're not really running towards the painting in the same way. A player might not blatantly be able to figure it out immediately, but they also don't fully have to figure it out either, since when they get inside they'll be able to adjust the water level by just looking for those switches. It's just one of those uniquely interesting aspects of the game that they implemented and tried to guide players towards figuring it out without spelling it out too much. And I think the way that it was done was brilliant and really added to the mystery behind the secrets of the castle. In any case, the first star is titled Shocking Arrow Lifts. Players will start off in one corner of the map. There will be a bunch of platforms to their left, a long black cage to their right, and basically a multi-story outdoor building they can climb on the opposite corner. Much like with most stars in this game, the first entry a player will often explore to their heart's content, and that can lead them towards finding all of the intricate little details around the stage, including the rising water levels and whatnot. The amount of time every player explores will vary, but eventually they'll notice little lifts with arrows, and enemies that will shock you. Suddenly, shocking arrow lifts will start to make sense. Figuring out that the stars related to these things is only the first part of the mission though. A player will need to make sure they're at the right water elevation. The star is available after undergoing platforming challenges related to moving the arrow platforms, but the catch is if you start off with the water level too low, you'll have to raise it up so you can actually reach the platforms. And if you think you're smarter and decide to raise the water level above the platforms, well, they put the yellow star in a box, so the players can't simply just swim past everything, since they won't be able to break the yellow box open because they're underwater. So you have to jump around and experiment with the correct switches to get the water level to the correct height in order to properly go for the star. After that's all said and done, a difficult platforming challenge ensues. These platforms are all very small, and as many people have vocalized throughout the years, controlling Mario in a tight space is not very easy. When people who like this game and say it controls very well say certain lines like, "I got used to it," or "I was able to master the controls," or "I figured it out so most players should be able to," stars like this are part of learning how to control Mario. It's been discussed to death, but Mario's turns aren't really all that instantaneous, in that when you turn he sort of lags or delays because momentum's carrying him in one direction, so it's not very snappy. The way around this is to have Mario stop to a full halt before changing directions, and this specifically applies to small platforms and sharp corners, which isn't the general norm of these games, but happens enough where a player will have figured this out. Players who play this game long enough will literally not understand what the big deal is because they figured that out when they were younger, but weren't able to quantify it or discuss it tangibly. They just knew that they had no issues and subconsciously were stopping Mario to turn. But they also had nothing else to compare it to because this was the first 3D Mario game they played. But now the discussion has been had plenty of times, and it's a good way for people to understand how to control Mario in these situations. It's actually similar to the discussion in Mega Man 1, where people would often say his controls were slippery, but players eventually figured out that they'd be able to avoid that slipperyness by quickly hopping at the end of the platform, since that would stop Mega Man in his place. It's just one of the natural ways longtime players will adapt to these controls that were very much experimental for the time. Regardless, this arrow challenge is not the first time you'll have to learn to control Mario in a tight space, but it's set up in a manner that you're basically going to have to figure it out if you want to fully succeed. Because the platforms are small, the turns are sharp, and the enemies around Mario will not allow you to casually tiptoe. You might have to actually jump or dodge. But you probably won't lose a life. The punishment will just be starting the challenge over and over again. Because even if you lose a bit of health, you'll fall into the water and immediately regain that health and start over. It's very much like a modern challenge in that aspect. Basically, a platforming section with unlimited lives and the ability to quickly repeat the challenge over and over again without having to run through an entire stage beforehand. So because players are able to get through the challenges multiple times with minimal delays, and because they'll have to figure out how to control Mario in a tight space to get through it, getting through this star is one of the best ways the game teaches you how to control Mario. Your muscle memory will start to subconsciously take what you did here and apply it to challenges throughout the game. Don't get me wrong, there are moments before that led you to this as well. After all, this is like the 11th stage now. But this test is much harder than any of the ones before it, and due to how some of these stages up ahead are, the first star in Wet Dry Land becomes one of the most critical challenges for a player to overcome as they prepare themselves for the endgame. And yeah, that's just star number 1. Star number 2 is titled Top of the Town. By the time you start the second star, you might already have figured out a good chunk of the map and learned that there was a water gimmick, but you still might not know that the water level changed because of how high you jumped into the painting. Heck, you might have jumped at the same height and nothing would have changed at all. But if the water did change, a player might just think it changed because this is the second star. I highlight this because as you get better in the game, you can make the star easier by simply jumping higher into the painting. Otherwise, assuming you start around the average or below average height, you'll have to figure out how to make your way up to the corner of the building since the star is at the very top of all of this. Again, this whole experience will vary depending on how high the water is when you start, and how high you decide to make it before climbing up. You might just be going up a ramp, pushing some blocks, letting a robot flick you upwards. Whatever the traversal requires, you'll have to find a way to make it to the top of the map. Once you're up there, you'll have to dodge an enemy that'll chuck you all the way down, and force you to start over again. If you can make it past that enemy, all that's remaining is along a narrow bridge, and 2 fairly risky jumps later, you'll have the Power Star. But again, with every fall is a restart of the challenge. The name of the star makes it fairly easy to figure out where the Power Star is, but getting up there could be a tricky challenge. Keep in mind, a player might have even prepared the cannon for the first star and tried to use that to blast themselves upwards. There are just many different and dynamic ways to put your platforming and puzzle solving skills to the test, and it makes me love this stage all the more because of it. The third star is titled Secrets in the Shallows in the Sky. This one will put you to the test. There are 5 unique secrets around the map that a player is meant to figure out, and they range from painfully obvious to well hidden. The hardest part will be to figure out exactly what it is you're looking for. So this will be the star that you do the most searching for to figure out the intricate details about the stage. At some point during exploration, you'll either notice some movable blocks that you can push, or you'll see some interestingly placed yellow blocks throughout. Regardless of what you find first, it'll cause one of those unique noises in the number 1 to appear on screen, indicating that there's a counter and you're meant to find more. This, in and of itself, is already a typical challenge that we'll see in this game, generally with the red coin star. But with the way this is set up, you'll have to manipulate the environment via the switches to grab these secrets, in that the water level has to be low enough to be able to interact with these blocks, or high enough to help you reach the various locales. Once you collect all 5 secrets, you can grab the star, or if needed, readjust the water level and then head to the star. Either way, each of these secrets alone will provide their own unique challenge in order to collect, and it makes for a fun scavenger hunt and stands out in a collectathon full of scavenger hunts. The next star hint is Express Elevators. Hurry up. This was actually first, and for a long time, the only star I was able to get in the stage. When you play through the stage, pretty early on you can figure out where the star is since it sits at the top of the inside of the cage. As per usual, a player might try and grab it with a water level high enough, and they won't be able to. There's a platform just outside of the cage, and if the player stands on it, it'll cause part of it to drop down below, and that player needs to get down to the bottom quick enough to get on the elevator before it rises back up. If the water level is too high, you can't get down there fast enough, since you'll be slowed down by the swimming. So part of the challenge is realizing that the only way you're going to make it low enough to get on the elevator is by having the water level at the lowest point. But the problem now lies in figuring out how to work your way up to the top of the stage so that you can activate the elevator platform. But by now, you should have messed around long enough in this stage to figure out the best way up there. With the water level at its lowest point, you need to drop down, swing inside the cage, and catch your ride before it takes off again and heads back to the start. Another unique puzzle and skill-required platforming challenge that I really enjoy succeeding in. The final 2 stars will require Mario to head to the secret area of the stage, otherwise known as the town. The cage I mentioned earlier in the corner of the stage? Yeah, that's the entrance to the secret area. We used to spend hours trying to blast Mario off and seeing if we land him in the cage. I'm not sure if we were ever able to land him in the cage because eventually we figured out that the height of your entry into the painting determined the water level. We no longer had any use for the cannon anymore. The goal here is to backflip in front of the painting and cause Mario to enter the stage from the highest point possible. This will allow you to basically swim right up to the cage and hop into the swim to the town. When you get to the town, you'll need to find the 8 red coins. I always found this town to be super interesting. Like, they didn't need to go into this much detail building this quaint little area with basically nothing but a red coin mission. In order to collect all the coins, you'll need to get the water down to the lowest level. Once that's done, you'll have to perform cartwheels and flips and maneuver your way around and search to collect the 8 red coins. I appreciate the stage because they put 2 different scavenger hunts in 2 different areas. The secrets are in the main location, and the red coins are in the town. I might have preferred the 8 red coins in the big area since there is more to collect and they'd have been the more obvious collectibles, and the secrets could have been in the town, which is a bit smaller and easier to get around, but I think I'm just being nitpicky. The important thing for me is they managed to make both sections of the stage their own little unique searching star. And with that, the final star is titled Quick Race Through Downtown, which more or less requires you to grab the blue vanish cap and run fast enough through the stage in the corner of the town and grab the power star. In addition to that, as I mentioned earlier, the 100 collection coin star is one of the easiest ones in the game, especially since by the time you get to the star, you'll already have figured out all the intricate details of the stage when it comes to the water level and adjustments. The stage is generous, the blue block switch is generous, there are plenty of coins to collect, and due to the fact that this is a water level with fairly shallow water almost always readily available, you're not likely to lose a life since you can easily replenish your health in the water, so as long as you don't swim down under long enough to drown, you'll be able to get your 100 coins very easily. Now, I'm going to say this knowing full well that many of you will disagree with me, but I think I can make a case that this stage doesn't have a single star that is made worse because you're sent back to the hub world between the stars. In fact, I'd argue simply because of the fact that you can adjust the water level based off the height of the paintings, this stage is better because it kicks you out so that either A, you can figure out that you can adjust the water level, or B, if you already figured out you can adjust the water level, you can utilize that to enter the stage in whatever way you feel is most beneficial to you. The shocking arrow lifts ends with you on the side of the stage where the water level at a certain height. When you collect that one, it's quicker to jump out of the stage and jump back in so that you can take the platforms to climb the stage for the top of the town. Or better yet, jump even higher and get the water up there so you can get there quicker. The secrets in the shallows in the sky is a star better started off when you're lower down to the ground, so you're better off going back to the hub world rather than swimming down to adjust the level. Also, that star is a scavenger hunt, and I always think those, similar to the red coin stars, are best done in their own unaffected life so that you can use your mission objectives to learn and explore the entire stage in depth. The express elevator is best done with the water levels at its lowest point, and most of the stars will be completed with the water level higher than that. And the 2 stars in the town will require the water level to be at the highest point. A point that is actually higher than any of the other switches available in the main area. So you can't actually accomplish this star unless you're kicked out of the stage and perform a backflip to get back in there at the highest water level. You could maybe argue the 6th star with the vanish cap and the red coins are redundant, but that's entirely contingent on if a player has even unlocked the invisible cap by the time they made it up to the stage, and not every player will have done that. Don't get me wrong, a first-time player might not know that you can alter the water level, and a long-time veteran might have optimal routes figured out to adjust the water level, so there is a decent amount of instances where this could be actually better if you're not kicked back to the hub world. It's hard to gauge on a first-time player, especially because it's such a specific secret to the stage and the switches are all around, but honestly, even for me, a non-speedrunning veteran, I know exactly where I'm jumping into the painting for each star to get my optimal route in. And pretty much every time I start this stage, I like to start the water level at a different elevation. And I think that's part of the reason I genuinely love the challenge of Wet Dry World. It's super unique. Players can set up their own optimal routes and maneuvers. The challenges and obstacles a player is meant to accomplish almost never leads to a loss of a life. Rather, it's just a setback punishment that requires you to restart. The stage tests out my problem and puzzle solving skills, as well as my platforming skills. There is little to no excessive repetition as I play through the stage because the areas and the water levels are dynamic and unique. And regardless of which challenge I undertake in this stage, I find myself having way more fun accomplishing the task and collecting the star, and feeling good about that accomplishment. And with that in mind, the count for the stars that are made worse and feel redundant because we're kicked back at the stage is still at 19, and the total star count is now at 77. In the case of this stage, it's actually one of my favorites. I don't know what the community opinion of the stage is. Maybe it's hated, or maybe everyone loves it, I'm not sure. But I know for a fact that the next stage is one that I have a whole lot of love for, and everyone seems to point out how much they dislike it. So let's head over to Tall Mountain. If Wet Dry World is one of my favorite stages because of how open sandboxed and puzzle solving focused it is, Tall Mountain is one of my favorite stages because of how linear and streamlined the challenge of it is. Also, I really like the aesthetics, and I love that it actually has typical Mushroom Kingdom style mushrooms. Something in general I appreciate about the upper level of Peach's Castle is that the 4 stages up there actually mirror the 4 stages on the first floor. Cool Mountain and Snowman's Land are both snow levels, Jolly Roger Bay and Wet Dry Land are both water levels, and we haven't gotten to it yet, but Tiny Huge Island in many ways feels like the next evolution of Bob-omb Battlefield. But perhaps the most distinct of these mirrored stages, and the 2 stages people are least likely to make some kind of connection between, are Whomp's Fortress and Tall Mountain. The aesthetic isn't all that similar. Granted, the aesthetic between Jolly Roger Bay and Wet Dry World aren't similar either, but at least there's a lot of swimming in both. But in regards to Tall Mountain, it is in my opinion the one stage that feels like it could be a harder version of what Whomp's Fortress was setting out to do. Both courses effectively start you off at the bottom of the stage, and you're meant to work your way up to the top. Both stages have bottomless pits surrounding the stage and could easily lead to a loss of a life and potential game overs. Both stages have multiple routes that involve points where you can break off or even take shortcuts to scale the mountain quicker. And both stages have stars that require you to jump into a cannon and blast yourself off into the abyss with pinpoint accuracy. The difference is Tall Mountain takes everything in Whomp's Fortress and makes it larger, harder, and with more potential hazards that could lead to Mario's death. I think Tall Mountain takes some of the more streamlined linear path philosophies of the earlier stages like Bob-omb Battlefield, Whomp's Fortress, and even Cool Mountain, and just shifts the difficulty up 2 or 3 notches, making it actually one of the most challenging and as a result, rewarding courses in the game for me. And quite frankly, while I can understand some of the complaints people make in later linear stages like Tick-Tock Clock and Rainbow Road, not saying I agree or disagree with those complaints yet, but I understand them, I think Tall Mountain gets way more hate than is warranted. And obviously, in saying that, I'm going to explain why by going through the stars in the stage. The first mission is obviously the simplest objective. Scale the mountain. This is as linear as it gets. You need to make it to the top of the mountain. I've alluded to this before, specifically early on in this retrospective, but linear stars and linear paths to follow in and of themselves are not a bad thing. In fact, these linear paths follow the same fundamentals of Mario as he was in 2D, as well as what we would see later in the series in games like Galaxy and, 3D World and Land. Every sandbox 3D Mario game may be a collectathon, but they all have many linear challenges that could easily be considered 3D World type stages. In that they're linear paths you're meant to run through with a start and end point, only the game developers find a way to make it feel like it's more wide open than it really is. Even Bob-omb Battlefield in essence is a giant sandbox, but if you put a few walls on the side of the main routes it takes you up the mountain to get to King Bob-omb, it feels just like a 64 3D World stage. This is similar to the argument I used to make about the Sonic Adventure games before we got to Heroes and then eventually Boost Formula. While yes, the earlier games were more open, the vast majority of players, at least the ones that aren't fully trying to break and explore every square inch of the stage, are going to play the adventure games as if they're just a linear path, point A to point B, without veering off too much. Mario 64 has many different stages on at least one or two of the stars that will have a clear endpoint in mind and basic linear route towards the endpoint, even though players can choose to veer off that point as they explore. But anyway, when you're scaling the Tall Town Mountain, your first obstacle will be a pit you need to jump over. If you fall, you'll land on land below and be able to collect coins to regain health and work your way back up. But you need to learn how to jump over that gap, ideally with a long jump. Pass by that, and you'll get to a second similar jump, only this time if you fall down, you'll lose a life. This is pretty typical platforming game design. Learn with one forgiving jump so that you can apply it to the next challenge. Continue around the mountain and you'll notice some red mushrooms with coins over them. We can pass by those for now, but at least we know where to find them. And better yet, once you head around the corner, you'll notice some platforms you can jump up that will require cartwheels and backflips to ascend, which will also contain red coins. This whole segment serves as not only a red coin challenge, but also a shortcut for the player that master Mario's control to be able to skip through a large chunk of the mountain. But for now, we'll continue our way around. You'll quickly pass by 3 Bob-ombs and eventually find one of those enemies that'll chuck you. If you can avoid him, you'll have to pass over a narrow bridge and jump over a gap that contains the pink Bob-omb and make it to the next area with a monkey. And you'll have to go through one of those rolling log challenges that we experience in Lethal Lava Land to make it over a large pit. If you can't pass by this, you'll once again fall down a waterfall and end up at the start of the stage and have to do it all over again. So you'll need to learn how to get through this point in order to continue up the mountain along this path. This could actually be a difficult challenge and will take quite a bit of expertise to accomplish. Luckily for players that still aren't comfortable enough getting through it, the previous shortcut was set prior to this challenge and allows you to skip past it altogether. I'm fairly certain I couldn't get through this log for a very long time, primarily because I was super young, but I was still able to get every star in the stage by avoiding the log, which made me always appreciate the shortcut. Regardless, when you pass by the challenge, there will be 2 routes. An upper one that'll require you to pass by some falling cannonballs, and a lower path that'll require you to jump across the platforms or monkey bar across. The shortcut from below also converges along these 2 paths, with the upper path requiring a few more leaps upwards to get to. Still, the 2 paths converge after these challenges, and players will now have to hit a long jump over a ramp and maneuver up the last few areas to make it to the star at the top of the mountain. The star itself just feels like a typical linear path you would take in any 3D platformer, with multiple routes and various challenges and secrets throughout as you pass through them. And I think it's one of the more enjoyable straightforward linear routes in the game. Star number 2 is titled Secret of the Monkey Cage. There are 2 ways to think about this star. Either you're a fully new first-time player and you'll probably run up the mountain back to the monkey near the rolling log and try to catch it. I'm guessing that's what most people will do and figure out the objective has nothing to do with this monkey. And you'll probably lose your hat, and it'll likely be a whole ordeal until you get your hat back and work your way back up the mountain, searching everything along your path and making it to the actual monkey you're meant to catch at the top of the mountain, making it a star that requires the same trajectory as the first star. But it'll be more of a search to figure that out. And the search generally leads towards players discovering more of the map, which I think is a positive aspect of a collectathon. The second way to view this map is the player might know to make their way to the top of the mountain, and in that case their route up the mountain could also be useful because now they'd be able to try the different routes and shortcuts along the way. So it would be a chance to repeat the similar objective while taking a more unique route in any case. But regardless, when a player reaches the monkey, he'll ask you to follow him. He'll go down to a floating cage and release a star from its location and let you jump down the waterfall to grab it. Next up is the red coin star. Hopefully by now you'll have noticed the red coins on the mushrooms and the platforms that take you up through the shortcuts. Finding the coins is easy enough, but there's a bit of challenge in actually collecting them. Primarily the ones on the mushrooms. The mushrooms have slopes along the edge of them, and some of them are a lot slipperier than the others. It's not uncommon to fall off and lose a life in this area, but it's also close enough to the start of the stage where it's not too terrible of a setback. After you head back around the corner and work your way up for the red coins, backflips, cartwheels, and careful jumps so that you don't fall back to the bottom. I remember the first time I played this I had an issue reaching the top red coin, and eventually figuring out it was easier to drop down in from the cannonballs up top, but now it's not much of a worry anymore. Either way, this is a pretty easy to locate red coin star, but moderately difficult to collect. It's a welcome star though, given a lot more of this stage requires a ton of traversal. Mysterious Mountainside is the next star. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if this was the last star players collected, because stars 5 and 6 are actually visible if you run through the stage, and this one is super obscure. The star is the third and final slide in this game, and it's hidden on a wall on the side of the mountain that you enter as if it's a painting, but it blends in like the entrances to the Shifting Sandland and Snowman's Land. The star is in a location next to an angry cloud that'll blow Mario away, and you might bump into the wall because of the cloud, or rather because you're trying to avoid the cloud. That's the only thing I can really say to help the case for how obscure it is. But I will say it's one of those hidden locations that the first time you see it, you might think it's hidden, but after that it seems so obvious that a secret lies in that perfectly square segment of the wall that you can't help but assume your subconscious spotted the entrance to the slide on its own. Perhaps the one downside to this stage is that it's yet another star that will see you running up and down the mountain again. And by this point in time, you'll have seen enough where it's not all that interesting anymore, and could get redundant. But in fairness, finding the wall is only half of it, because the slide is easily the hardest of the 3 slides in this game so far. There's even a gotcha moment where the slide just cuts off and you're meant to turn. Now to be fair, there are a ton of signs telling you to make that turn, but still, with how quick you're moving on the first run, you could still get blindsided and slide right past it. It's a fun star too, and a very challenging one, fitting of a later star in the later stage in the game. And then star number 5 is hidden behind the waterfall across the narrow bridge at the top of the stage. You're meant to hit a switch that'll activate a platform for you to better jump into the waterfall, but you can technically get to the star just fine without it if you're comfortable in Mario's jumps. Either way, I could make excuses for the first 3 stars moving you up and down the mountain and allowing you to learn the stage, or at the very least one of them really forcing you to search every nook and cranny and require you to be victorious down the slide. But I can't really make an excuse for this star though, as it feels way too redundant by this point. I think this stage gets criticisms for 2 main reasons. One reason is that it's very difficult the first time around, which I think is funny because it's not nearly as difficult or as frustrating as at least 2 out of 3 of the remaining stages. And 2, it requires you to climb the mountain 5 times, which makes people whine because the automatic thought process was that if this was a true modern style open sandbox collectathon, they'd be able to finish most of the objectives by just getting up there 1 time. What I think people fail to consider is that if you're actually going into the stage blind, the routes through the mountain vary quite a bit the first 2 or 3 times. I mean, in any linear platform you play with multiple routes and more than 1 mission, people are okay with repeating those stages for the extra missions, even though they're more or less going through the exact same routes. And part of the reason they appreciate those multiple missions is because the game incentivizes you to run through the stage again to try multiple routes, as well as making more optimal routes through the stages or collecting a random MacGuffin as you traverse. I'm not sure why Mario 64 doesn't get that same point of view. Maybe people will automatically define it as a collectathon rather than view it as a 3D platformer, which would allow them to dock any linearity against it. I'm not sure, because I always appreciated that this game had searching, collecting, puzzle solving, action platforming, and linear route accomplishing all in one. I like that I'm required to go through some of these stages more than once because I either get to try the alternate routes, learn the stages more, or find new and hidden secrets that I missed the first time. It's the same reason I like going for full completion in any platformer. The difference is in Mario 64, those hidden secrets are just straight up power stars, and are the actual main MacGuffin. Would people prefer it if the branching paths were completely blocked off as they traversed up the mountain to make each traversal stand out? Wouldn't that defeat the whole purpose of being an open world style game where you can learn and choose your own routes? I'm not sure what the big deal is with so many stars in this game being in similar locations when the stages are almost always unique enough so that the routes to the star won't be the same. Especially in obscure objectives where you'll be doing more searching rather than simply running to a specific endpoint. This allows most stars to feel unique. While I agree with people when they say it's a chore to return to because you end up taking the same paths multiple times, I also wonder how many times did they play this game until they started to feel like it was a chore to return to. Because even with maybe 2 or 3 different 120 star runs, you could still get quite a bit of a unique experience going through many of these stages multiple times just based off you getting better and learning how to control Mario and experimenting with the movement. And even if that's not the case, who cares if it's a chore to return to? I swear, Mario 64 is like the only 3D platformer that gets judged based off its 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or even 5th playthrough. And that's probably because it's the only game people actually enjoy enough to fully complete more than once. But still, there just has to be an echo chamber that blows this much out of proportion. Good God, I haven't even made it to TikTok Clock and Rainbow Ride yet. I need to pace myself. But that being said, I don't think this stage is redundant. It has 1 more star than it probably needs that is redundant. First star, get to the top. Second star, get to the top and mess around with separate routes. Third star, get through the early stage red coin challenges. Fourth star, search the entire mountain for a mystery. Yes, starting the mission from where the red coins ended would be beneficial, but then it'd defeat the whole purpose of searching for the whole mountainside for a secret. And the 5th star is the redundant one that once again requires you to climb all the way up to the top just to jump into the waterfall. So with that star, we're now at 20 stars out of the 84 that I would say are actually redundant and significantly worse of an experience to put the player through. Also, the 6th star in the stage requires you to find the cannon and get it open, which hopefully you'll have done so by now, and blast off into the star over a mushroom ahead of you. We've done this a few times now. We've had plenty of cannon chances. This is the ultimate test of aim. You have basically no leeway. It's a direct shot or nothing. And this star is my final comparison to Whomp's Fortress. That one had an easier blast with pillars and poles all around you to help you. This one requires perfection, and will probably lead to a few deaths and maybe a game over or two while you're getting the hang of it. I remember going through a bunch of trial and error for it, and I imagine many people did too. But there was a huge sense of celebration and relief when I got it. And speaking of celebration and relief, the coin star in this stage is one of the hardest ones. Shifting Sandland and Hazy Maze Cave are the worst. But the problem with this one in particular is that there aren't enough coins. You have to go through the slide, which means if you hit 100 coins on the slide, you're probably not going to be able to grab the star. So you actually have to go through the slide first if you want any chance at success, but you won't know that until you actually go through the slide and not collect the star. Add on to the fact that this is a vertical level with multiple routes all around and many of the enemies offering only a single coin without blue coins splashed around and a plethora of locations to fall to your doom and start over. And you get yet another of the hardest missions in the game. And yet another one that is most likely going to be one of the final stars a person will collect only if they're going for full completion. But, and I know you've heard me say this before, I still like this mission. I like the challenge. I like that I experienced the challenge. And I don't think it's so absurdly difficult that it ruins the stage. Telltale Mountain is another stage that I adore in this game. It's well up there. Also, I really like the next stage, which over the years I've heard more and more people whine about. But when I was younger, Tiny Huge Island was often a favorite, and I'm pretty sure it was mostly because the gimmick reminded everybody of Super Mario Bros. 3. So next, we'll head over to that island and figure it out. Tiny Huge Island has one of the most standout gimmicks in all of Mario 64. And honestly, I wouldn't argue against someone too much if they claimed it was the most standout gimmick in the entire Mario series. It makes a stage extremely memorable as a result, and oftentimes people remember the gimmick of the stage more than the actual stars. Casual gamers, or even non-gamers that played Mario 64 as a kid, will usually remember maybe half of the stages max, and it'll always be because of the aesthetic. Bob-omb Battlefield, Whomp's Fortress will usually get mentioned first, primarily because of the early stages. They might mention a fire level, a snow level, a ghost level, a clock level at most. Maybe a water level. But the point is these stages will get remembered because of some kind of theme or setting or usually an aesthetic related to elements. Tiny Huge Island usually clicks in someone's mind though, even though it's just a typical grassland stage. And obviously, this is because of the notorious stage gimmick that either shrinks the stage or blows everything up in size. Or I guess it might shrink Mario and blow him up in size. I'm not sure. Although I think I do have an argument that it's the former. When you enter the room that holds a Tiny Huge Island painting, if you run into the painting straight ahead, it's a dead end. But if you turn right or left, the hallway will play a bit of an illusion trick on you and make Mario feel like he's either huge or tiny before entering into the stage. But regardless of which way you turn, Mario is the same size. The only thing that is changing around him is the path leading up to the painting and the size of the painting itself. Which for me means there are actually two different Tiny Huge Islands that exist in the universe, and Mario travels between the two of them via the green pipes. He's not shrinking and increasing in size as he enters those pipes, the stage is. Hence why it's called Tiny Huge Island and not Tiny Huge Mario. It's the island that has two different dimensions, one huge and one tiny. I personally wanted to discuss this point more than the actual stars, so I'll try not to drag all of that out as much as my last couple of videos. This one's a bit harder to go through because of the two different sized islands. But as a general rule of thumb, you should expect to spend some time bouncing between the sizes and experimenting with the exploration to figure out where you need to be and how to grab a star. A lot of the stage will be trial and error. When you're on Tiny Island, Mario will be massive and he'll be able to get around everything fairly easily, and quickly. When you're on Huge Island, the stage will probably be bigger than any other one in the game. The catch is the stars aren't in both locations. You have to collect each one while you're a specific size. The first star, Pluck the Piranha Plants, is pretty close to where you are at the start of the stage, but you might not even realize that unless you're big because you can't swim over to this location when you're small. So you'd have to search around the stage looking for the Piranha Plants and then know to shrink yourself down in that area and defeat all of the larger Piranha Plants to get the star. The star will get you acquainted with the stage gimmick fairly quickly. You might take forever to figure out the star specifically because it's the first one, but that should get your methods in order and allow you to get comfortable with how to search in the stage for stars. Star number 2 is at the tip top of the huge island, so Mario will be little here and traverse his way all the way up to the peak. Again, this stage is very open with multiple different routes and multiple chances for experimentation through different sizes, so it's on you to mess around with the strange gimmicks to find your preferred means of traversal. You can swing across to the left and jump into the pipe to change sides or work your way around the outside of the stage while avoiding cannonballs, or you can do a few backflips and skip through the water area and work your way up through the nearest warp pipe. It's basically on the player to determine how they want to make it up there. I do think it's funny that the star is titled Top of Huge Island because it's actually more your favorite star off the stage with a tiny island, but I can really only say that in hindsight. But still, I think it's better off from a first-time perspective because it'll be a good opportunity to get through the challenge the more difficult way, unless you're experimental enough to try it the easy way. The third star is a rematch with Koopa the Quick. You'll need to find him. And not to get repetitive, but you'll do the whole 2-island search all around until you figure it out. It shouldn't actually be that hard to figure out that he's a huge island star though, but he's also in one of the further locations from where you begin the stage, so this star just gives you another opportunity to mess around with the stage and learn different routes. Also, the race itself is much harder than the previous race, so good luck. You might not only lose, you might fall off the bottomless pit and lose a life. 5 Itty Bitty Secrets is an exploration star in Tiny Island. There will be random locations throughout the map that a curious player might want to interact with when they're larger size because they stick out in locations you can't access. Mostly doorways or holes around the stage that if you were in Huge Island, you would simply just run through or to enter a different area. It's pretty straightforward once you start getting an eye for what exactly you're looking for. You just need to figure out that you're meant to be on Tiny Island throughout, and that should be easy based off the name of the star anyway. It's a decent scavenger hunt. Also, keep in mind Tiny Island is very easy to fall off of and lose a life by accident, so you have to be careful. Star number 5 is Wiggler's Red Coins. It's not explicitly stated, and a player might even figure out by sheer curiosity and exploration, but the Red Coin star is across the narrow path above the sandy area near the water that leads directly into the cave. At one point or another, it might be during the previous stars, a player will likely try to enter that area and then notice there's red coins. Finding it isn't the worst challenge, but you're really going to be enjoying the exploration aspect of the stage to figure out that you need to be inside that cave. And what's worse is the challenge in there is also fairly difficult. Although once again, not the worst challenge you'll face and overall very beatable. Finally, star number 6 is Make Wiggler Squirm. I'm probably sounding like a broken record by now, but this is all about the exploration and problem solving. You need to be on Tiny Island. Head over to the top of the island and hip drop. It'll play a jingle and drain the water. Head back down, change to Huge Island. Work your way back up there and enter from the hole at the top of the island. You'll stand on some mesh and face off against Wiggler. It's similar to the Red Coin Star in that figuring it out will be a difficult but fair objective, but with the red coins, the actual coin collecting is a lot more of a platforming challenge with a decent difficulty. And with Make Wiggler Squirm, it's a boss fight with a decent difficulty. Take on Wiggler and you'll get your 6th star. I'm probably being a bit unfair in saying this, but I think the 100 coin collection star is the worst in the game. Or maybe second worst behind Shifting Sandlands. Keep in mind there's like over 200 coins here, so in theory that should make it easy. The problem lies in the fact that the easiest way to get around everything is when Mario is larger than the stage, but it's also the easiest way to bump into a dinky micro Goomba and fall to your death. There are just too many ways here, both in Tiny Island and Huge Island, that a player could collect a whole lot of coins and then be forced to start over. Heck, you could literally get eaten by a fish. You might try and experiment with a cannon in the stage and that'll lead to a loss of a life. I realize this is how most 3D platformers play, but it feels like everything in the stage is trying to kill you at all times. So really, it's not a difficult coin collecting challenge, it's more like a difficult survival challenge. Which is fine because in all of the stars beforehand, you'll be doing enough searching to make up for it. I have less to say about this course, but it's primarily because it's so wide open and has so many standout moments as you run through the stage that going through all of the various environments wouldn't really make all that much sense since nothing is really on a main path. Because there isn't a main path. From a design perspective, this is a really good sandbox stage in my opinion. And I could easily see it flourishing if it was a retro remade stage in the future title. It's fun to run around and look everywhere, and due to the size changing gimmick and uniqueness of the star missions and their locations, you'll likely spend quite a bit of time in here. This stage is mostly about exploration. What Dry World was also about exploration, and I thought that stage was better off because of the water level gimmick adding a dynamic sense to the exploration. Likewise, I think the stage uses the 2 different islands to make the exploration aspect of it even more enjoyable. I don't know exactly when people started hating the stage, but I don't really think it needs to be hated. Hard stages don't have to automatically be shrugged off as broken or frustrating or game ruining. They can just be hard, and it's on the player to learn to get through it. There's something about the latter half of this game that just angers people, and I don't know, it just feels like there's a lot of inconsistent complaints sometimes. Like, Telltale Mountain is disliked because it's linear, and Tiny Huge Island is hated because it's an open sandbox. Honestly, the stars aren't even that ridiculously absurd or too difficult to find. I don't have too many frustrating memories of this stage really giving me or anyone I know that many issues. Like I said, we all mostly just liked it because it had a standout and fun gimmick to mess around with. The stars did require some experimentation and searching, but it usually didn't even require an absurd amount of time to take care of those searches. And despite the fact that it's an open sandbox level, I still think it's easier to almost get all of the stars by being sent back to the hub world. Star 1 with the Piranha Flower sending us back could be seen as redundant since the second star is at the tip of the huge island, but the whole multiple size things and multiple routes thing will almost certainly make it feel unique. But still, I can dock at a point because it'd be easier to just continue on from there since the objective is an obvious one and you don't need to think too much about where to go, because you just need to go up. Rematch with Koopa the Quick is easier to access from starting the stage over after that. 5 itty-bitty secrets too, since you want to be larger. And same with Wiggler's red coins and Make Wiggler Squirm, since they require different sizes. But all the stars here in general give a vague hint, and I think part of their enjoyment is having to jump around with the size gimmick to figure out how to collect the stars, so I don't really find any of them as obtrusive or egregious as many of the other stars that felt redundant for being sent back to the start. The only one I'm going to add to this list is Pluck the Piranha Flowers. And that's only because after you collect the star, you're still pretty close to the start of the stage, so the return to the hub world feels redundant. So after 13 stages and 91 stars, 21 of them feel like they make the game worse, or redundant, or they ruin the experience strictly because of the return to the hub world. But next up is one of 2 stages that people will complain about the most. So let's keep moving forward and reconvene at the conclusion to really get into it. Next up is perhaps one of the most infamous stages in the game, Tick-Tock Clock. Tick-Tock Clock is one of the hardest linear platforming stages in all of 3D Mario. Before being kicked out of the stage was the most discussed criticism of Mario 64, the critique most frequently brought up was that, as a general rule of thumb, linear stages did not belong in a collectathon. I'm pretty sure the first time I heard that comment was when Banjo and Kazooie came out, and was further cemented as Rare released their quartet of games on Nintendo 64. Now, I think many of the criticisms in relation to those discussions have already been debunked, and gamers have at least to some extent acknowledged that a lot of these so-called open sandbox styled games, specifically these classic ones, have a lot more linear aspects to them than previously thought. But there are still hours upon hours of videos that will specifically throw a blanket statement on Mario 64 that the reason it's bad, or rather the reason specifically certain stages are bad, is because of the linearity that exists through those stages. The funny thing is, many of those stages do a pretty good job of masking their linearity to some extent. Bob-omb Battlefield and Whomp's Fortress, for instance, have a specific linear path that is meant to be followed, but they find a way to mix up the routes a bit and place stars in locations that at least somewhat hides the linearity, or at the very least tricks the player into avoiding the linearity with the objectives and stage set pieces. Cool Mountain is massive, but the stage generally trends downwards so that a player can maneuver quicker down the linear path rather than trek their way up. After that, the stages get a lot more open. In the basement stages, the pyramid and the volcano do a lot of the linear style heavy lifting, but those only make up 2 or 3 stars in their respective stages. Aside from that, everything else through most of the stages are at least semi-open and have multiple paths the player can follow, even if one may stick out more than the others. That is, until you reach Tall Mountain. Tall Mountain basically takes all of the hand-holdy crutches from the first floor and removes them altogether. It has split paths, but they're further and fewer in between. It has areas to explore, but they're not vast and open areas. It has a lot more bottomless pits, a lot of ways to fall, and a lot of requirements to climb upwards. I already discussed Tall Mountain, so I don't really need to get into that again, but basically, take everything I said about the jump of difficulty that you see from Whomp's Fortress to that stage, and multiply it exponentially to reach Tick-Tock Clock. More linear, more difficult, more falling, more climbing, more ways to lose a life. Even more narrow pathways, and more obstacles, and just more stage gimmicks. Tick-Tock Clock is one of 2 stages on the final floor of Peach's castle, and these 2 stages are perhaps the most infamous of all of the stages in the game, and it's explicitly because of their linearity. Now that being said, there are also many people that love these stages, and often like to relegate the criticisms of these stages into the get good category. We'll set Rainbow Ride to the side for now and focus on the clock. I can respect both points of view. This is an endgame stage, and it should be difficult. It should be frantic and have upbeat music to make us feel as rushed and energetic as we felt while undergoing the fast-paced slide challenges. But it also should not undergo good stage design for the sake of that difficulty. And I think that's the specific question I'm setting out to answer by the end of this segment. Is Tick-Tock Clock a good endgame difficulty spike, or is this difficulty strictly a result of poor game design? Now, as a general idea, the stage is made up of narrow paths, moving upward, flipping and rotating platforms, cage landings, and just all-around internal gears in motion that you have to traverse around. The path more or less spirals upwards towards the peak of the clock. I could be wrong because it's a very hard stage to really break down, but looking at some complex maps and playing through the stage, it seems to me like there are basically 6 rotations you make around the stage to reach the peak of the clock, with the challenges kind of broken off into half sections, or half floors I guess. Which makes sense, since that would mean that there are 12 segments or challenges or sub-floors or whatever you want to call it, a player needs to undergo to reach the top of the clock theme stage. Honestly, this is more thought than I've ever given the breakdown of the stage, and I'm not sure if 12 half floors are common knowledge because I've never heard anyone mention that before. So if all of a sudden people online start talking about how Tick-Tock Clock has 12 floors and praising the ingenuity of the developers for that application, make sure you remember that it was Nintendo that first made it public knowledge. Or, leave a comment in case there was something obvious that everyone already knew and I was too dumb to figure it out. But just to be clear so we're not confused, I'll be referring to the clock's base or the starting point as the first floor. A half rotation up will be the second floor, and a full rotation will be the third floor, and so on and so forth. I'm sure I'll lose you at one point or another, so I'll do my best to be as coherent as possible while maybe throwing a map on the screen to help us track. But anyway, first star, roll into the cage. It has you run up 1.5 rotations to make it to the star holding cage, so it's on the 4th floor, or 1/3 of the way up the clock. You have conveyor belts, pendulums, rotating and revolving obstacles along your path. It's a very difficult challenge on a first time playthrough because you not only have to control Mario in a tight space, but you have to do it quickly, which is not something most people will be used to since it wasn't all that common up until this point. And this is made even worse because if you fall, you're at the mercy of your location. You could land significantly lower, or you can unluckily drop to your death if you're in the wrong spot. Honestly, even returning players can struggle with these aspects of the stage because so little of the game requires precision movement of Mario that this becomes a bit of a whiplash. As many will point out, you can offset the difficulty by jumping through the clock at the correct time to freeze all the mechanisms inside, and returning players will certainly do that to make the stage easier. But that only solves the issue of everything being in motion. You still have to be good enough to control Mario in a tight space. This star alone is already enough of an example of why the stage is so hated by new and old fans alike. But let's move through the rest of them because there will be a lot of repetition if we have the conclusion discussion now. The second star, the pit and the pendulums, effectively sits a full rotation above the first star, so it's on the 6th floor, or halfway up the clock. Basically, you face the same challenge you just endured as you head upwards, but instead of jumping in the cage on the first star, you jump on top of the cage and continue upwards. The big challenges here are maneuvering over a rotating triangular platform over a pit, and then jumping through pendulums over pits on a narrow platform to collect the star. Again, if you learn the gimmick of slowing down the stage due to where you enter, you can make this easier, but even at a slow speed, players will struggle if they haven't mastered the control of Mario yet. This is another very hard start, and it's not only hard because of what you endured beyond the first star, but realistically, a player can and will still struggle just to make it up through the first star and beyond, so even the stuff that they already accomplished is an obstacle. The third star is Get a Hand, and it sort of pulls a fast one on you. First off, you can't really grab the star while the stage is stagnant. I mean, you can if you're a veteran and know the maneuvers, but the average player will be grabbing the star the intended way. The star only requires you to move up a single rotation, which means you get to the 3rd floor. The catch is, it sits between the 2nd and 4th floor, opposite of the 3rd floor, which would normally be a blank wall, but instead it's a little alcove. In order to get there, you need to stand atop the thin hand of the clock and let it take you there. Again, simple enough to traverse to, but getting on the clock, comfortably moving Mario around, and being able to adjust the camera, and avoiding the enemy that tries and burns Mario's butt all add to that little bit of challenge that could make this way harder than it should be. Add on to that the fact that you have to be confident in your ability to make the jump off the clock's hand and into the star that many first players don't have, and you get another star that will frustrate even returning players despite seeming pretty straightforward. 4th star is Stomp on the Whomp. In the previous linear stages I mentioned earlier, this star would have been the first star. It's the peak of the clock. It's the star that you're meant to see the entire clock to get to. Not only is it all the way up on the 12th floor, but you had to do an extra challenge to get on the opposite side of it. In stages like Whomp's Fortress and Tall Mountain, they would send you straight to the top so you could see the whole stage on the first star. But in Tick-Tock Clock, they ease you into it with the first 3 stars before sending you upwards. Pass by the first star, pass by the second star, and even pass by the 5th star. More rotating platforms, more risky jumps, more tight maneuvers, more ways to die. But you make it to the top, You catch a ride on yet another clock hand that'll spin you around to a conveyor belt that'll allow you to make your precision jump onto Whomp and reach the star. Yada yada yada, challenging, etc, etc. Let's move on to the 5th star. It's almost directly above star number 2, and forks off during your route to star 4, and it sits roughly 2/3 of the way up to the top of the clock on floor 8. The route is in a bit of a blind spot. The camera fools you into moving into a specific direction which you would take towards star 4, but you're meant to head in the opposite direction of the camera. This isn't all that uncommon. A similar play was done at the floor of the volcano in Lava Land that required players to head in the direction opposite of where the camera is pushing you when you enter. And it's not that obscure because you'll certainly notice the route, or in this case, the cage the star sits in while you're going around the stage, so you'll know to eventually head back to this point if you accidentally miss it. But once you get to that point, it should be easy enough for you to make your way to the star. But again, get good, learn to play, and all that jazz. Finally, star number 6 is the red coin star. Many players will immediately notice the red coins because they're right next to you when you start the stage. Many players, myself included, will give up on trying to get the other stars because they keep losing a life and decide to go for the red coins and be incapable of grabbing more than 1 or 2 and slipping off. Obviously, the challenge of the star is not the star itself. Rather, it's about learning the stage gimmick of how to enter the stage. A player will no doubt notice the clock's moving parts all going about at different speeds as they go through the varying stars. This is similar to Wet Dry World in that you might simply assume the stage is changing because you selected a different mission. But the difference is you're a lot more likely to lose a life and get kicked out of Tick-Tock Clock, so you'll be re-entering quite a bit and you might notice different speeds in the stage. All of these strange speeds will ideally make a player experiment with the entry into the stage, and hopefully that'll be when they start trying to time their entry with the moving hand on the clock. I'm not sure if this is how the average player figured it out, but this is how I eventually figured it out when I was 6 or 7. All it takes is noticing the stage is acting differently with 3, 6, 9, or 12 o'clock, and that is enough to experiment to figure out that time is fast, slow, or stopped. And I gotta imagine most people will naturally gravitate towards trying 12 o'clock first anyway, since that points upwards, and 12 o'clock is generally the time you'll be leaning towards using as often as possible. It makes the stage significantly easier, or at least the stars that you can still grab that don't require moving parts. But specifically, star number 6, the red coin star, is an actual joke here. Second easiest red coin star to grab when the platforms are all stopped, with only the lethal Lava Land red coin star being easier. But again, the challenge here is figuring out the stage gimmick and not the actual collection. And I'm not gonna lie, I kinda love that they made it the 6th star, because the average player might end up collecting all 5 stars, going through all of that work and trauma and struggling to master the stage until they finally figured out that a lot of it could have been made so much easier if the minute hand was on the 12. You get the benefit of learning the gimmick to make the stage easier, but you're also forced, whether you like it or not, to learn how to traverse the top of the clock. You take the same paths multiple times, you make the same jumps, you fail in the same locations. It doesn't matter how many times you do it, it's still going to be a challenge unless you become an expert at controlling Mario. You have to become an expert here if you want to earn that 120 star count. Prior to this, there were a few moments sprinkled throughout the game that might require a double or triple jump, a stagnant backflip, or even a wall kick or long jump or dive. But in most areas of this game, all of these different jump techniques were options that you could attempt while running in safe areas. They weren't required. In Tick-Tock Clock, you actually have to know how to use a specific jump, and it'll be most players' preferred method of control. I'm not sure how most people get through Tick-Tock Clock without learning 2 things. First, it's the importance of stopping Mario in place before making a turn so that he can do a quick 180-degree pivot. That's pivotal, pun intended, to succeed in this game even prior to Tick-Tock Clock in some instances. And second, it's the cartwheel. Everyone always used to talk about how the long jump was their favorite jump to get through the game due to the range, and more recently the dive has become the preferred horizontal leap since it's both quicker and can damage enemies. But it's a lot safer to use a long jump than a dive, so it's usually the default means of traversal for players. When a player wants height though, the double jump can suffice. Backflip if you need something more extreme. But if you don't have the real estate or time to pull off a backflip, the cartwheel is where it's at. I figured this out at a young age. That's how I beat Tick-Tock Clock. That's where I learned to master Mario's control. And look, I know the term master is fairly relative. I've used it quite a few times as I've gone through this retrospective. When I say master, I don't mean that I'm in the top 1% or even 20% of people that control Mario in the world. What I mean is that I've mastered the control enough to get through the game comfortably on repeat playthroughs, and I'm inclined to believe that most people that love Mario 64, and especially love Tick-Tock Clock, are folks that master the controls as well. They're the ones that defend the stage. They're the ones that enjoy the challenge and the experience it puts them through. They're the ones that didn't mind the 100 coin star mission because traversing through the stage, especially if you stop the clock at 12 o'clock, is very easy if you know how to control Mario. But that's the thing, you have to be willing to learn how to control Mario in order to enjoy this stage. That's why I love Tick-Tock Clock. Imagine a setting this unique not being loved. Imagine a late stage challenge not being celebrated and praised. Tick-Tock Clock is easily within a shout of being my favorite stage in my favorite game of all time. But I'll save the discussion for when I do my tier list in the conclusion. I love the linearity here because it's such a focused and direct path that challenges you to traverse upwards. It challenges you to learn how to play the game. It's such an intense training session that even if you succeed, you have to run through it again. You'll be running past the first star 3 times in the stage, past the second star for 2 stars, and past the 5th star for 1 star. But I'll be frank, you'll need to do this multiple times because the goal here is not finishing the stage, it's mastering the stage. It's for that reason why I personally don't think any of these stars are actually redundant for a first-time player to go through, and why I think it's for the better that it's done this way. The reality is, you're never going to make it to that 4th star in a single run regardless. You're going to fall to the bottom and either lose a life or have to work your way back upwards again. Heck, you probably won't even make it to star 2 in a single run. This stage is designed like a classic linear 2D platformer, in that you're going to need to push and push further along, losing lives and getting game overs over and again, mastering each section of the clock more and more as you traverse upwards. It's intentionally designed that way. That's why the 4th star is all the way at the top of the stage and not the 1st star. Despite continually moving along the same route for the first 3 on the way up, I don't find this star redundant at all because those repeat runs are what you'll have to keep going through if you even want to think about getting good enough to get to the 4th star. And look, I understand that might sound like a cop-out, or that I'm backing off the stage because I have nostalgia bias or whatever. But keep in mind, stars 1, 3, and 6 are all in the bottom third of the clock, and star 2 sits right above them at about the halfway point. So it's not even like I'm sitting here saying you'll go through this entire stage 6 times to master it. It's really stars 4 and 5 that require that extra bit of traversal, and they branch off of one another pretty quickly after you reach star 2, so each of their routes and challenges to the star are much more unique than you think. It's just that first bit of traversal to get started on the stage that's repetitive, and that will teach you to traverse beyond the halfway point for stars 4 and 5. Not to mention the added benefit of being thrown out of the stage more allows players more of a chance to figure out the speed and time gimmick. Or better yet, it allows them to utilize the gimmick if they figure it out prior to the red coin star. And to break it down even more and hopefully convince you that I'm not simply making an exception for this stage and applying the same logic in all of the previous stages, star 1 ends in a cage that a conveyor belt and rotation platform surround. Star 2 is at the end of a narrow platform challenge that requires you to pass by swinging pendulums over a pit. Star 3 is in an alcove that you can't exit unless you make a super risky jump onto a moving thin clock hand. Star 4 is all the way up at the top of the stage, away from everything else, and Star 5 is in a cage that a bunch of moving platforms over a pit have to be traversed in order to escape. In all of these cases, it's almost certainly easier for a player to start back at the bottom of the stage than it is to have to go through these challenges in reverse, and more likely fall down because they failed. And furthermore, in the case of all of these stars, the final challenges you have to actually undergo to retrieve the stars will not be gone through more than once, and that will strictly be when you're trying to pick up the star. So while yes, you'll be going through a main path multiple times, and that aspect of it may feel redundant, it's not like you'll be going through the same challenges that are specific to each star, or even the sub-challenges that lead up to the final challenges. The routes are actually a lot less repetitive than people make them out to be, and I think many players conflate having to do the stage over and over again because of all the deaths they get with how many times they are actually repeated because of the stars. Because really it's just the first turn up to the platform above the red coins that actually feels all that repetitive in the stage. So yeah, none of the stars I just mentioned are worth a strike for sending you back to the start of the stage. Because in all cases of these stars, for multiple reasons, it's better to be sent back to the beginning for the sake of time, ease, and learning the gimmicks and control of Mario. With the only exception here being the red coin star, that one kind of has to get a strike because the star location is literally at the start of the stage. I could be petty and say that it's the 6th star, so it should send you back to the start of the stage regardless, but you obviously can collect the red coins whenever you want, so that's not too relevant. Either way, we're now at 22 of 98 redundancy stars, and I think I've said enough about Tick-Tock Clock. It is, in my opinion, a good endgame difficulty spike. And I've probably confused more people than intended, but in my defense, this is a very confusing map to explain. But one thing I know for certain, Tick-Tock Clock is much more enjoyable when you learn how to control Mario, and the stage itself teaches you how to control Mario in those tight and quick thinking spaces. And you're going to need every ounce of those control skills when you head over to the final course of Rainbow Ride. I apologize in advance to all of you for everything I'm about to say about Rainbow Ride. If you thought my defense of Tick-Tock Clock was an absurd hill to die on, wait until you see me apply all of the same general logic here. I think Rainbow Ride is a heck of a final stage in this game. Is it hard? Absolutely. But it's also the final stage in the game. And I think it's about as hard as an endgame stage should be in a Mario game. I absolutely love the whole absurdity of the setting too. Like this random stage in the sky, Bowser's flying ship in the corner, a freaking magic carpet riding a rainbow. It's such a weird theme to a stage, and the music is the same frantic music we got in Tick-Tock Clock. And thankfully, this one is a lot easier for me to explain than Tick-Tock Clock. The biggest talking point of this stage is the magic carpet, since every star will require you to at least get on the introductory magic carpet ride, while stars 1, 2, and 6 will require additional rides as well. So right off the bat, I should say that I don't think I fundamentally agree with the general talking point that I often see in platformers in regards to stage gimmicks that require you to move at the speed of the stage, rather than at your own pace. Basically, auto-scrollers, or in this case, traveling on a magic carpet. This seems to be a disliked trope. A lot of people consider it bad game design, specifically in platformers because it slows the game down. And I don't know what to tell you, I don't agree with this sentiment. I mean, yes, it does slow you down, and it requires you to move at the game's pace, but I don't think disliking it is enough of a reason to warrant it as bad game design or shrugging off the entire stage as a failure because of it. I actually welcome these stages because they create a new type of challenge that forces you to react to the hazards and maneuvers around the stage. It gives you time to focus on different types of control and reflexes than otherwise running through a stage would do. I think even people who have figured out how to control Mario in a tight space will see the stage as mundane because of the magic carpets. But even more so, players that haven't figured out how to control Mario yet will find the challenge to be near impossible. Me personally, I think it's a great final challenge to undergo. And once again, learning to control Mario on this tiny magic carpet is the ultimate test of your control of our favorite plumber. So with that precursor out of the way, the stage will make you go through a minor challenge every time you start it. So you'll be forced to learn to control Mario on the tight space prior to moving on within the later magic carpets. After the first segment, there are 3 different paths a player could take, and any one of those paths will lead to at least 1 star. You'll likely be guessing which way you're going to go anyway, but thankfully regardless of which way you head, you'll get a star for it. If you go right, you'll jump on a new magic carpet and go through your second auto-moving challenge. It'll take a few attempts to figure it out, but you'll have to do this 3 times total, so it's good to learn how to maneuver here because it'll get harder later. At the end of that carpet's route, it'll stop you between 2 magic carpets, and you'll quickly have to determine which path to jump on. The path on the right takes you to the first star, and the path on the left takes you to the second. So assuming you head right, you'll have to go through the final carpet challenge involving maneuvering Mario through obstacles that are just that much more difficult to get through while also not falling to your doom. And if you succeed, you'll make it to a flying ship and be able to grab the star. If you back up a bit to a junction with 2 carpets and head into the other direction, you'll go through a longer challenge that weaves in and out of the building that requires you to remain focused, lest you fall and get stuck in the giant house because you got burnt by the fireplace. Either way, at the end of this carpet route is the second star. After that, it's a lot more straightforward in Sans Magic Carpet. You just have to get through the first area challenge, or if you have confidence in yourself, pull off a long jump and learn to skip it altogether. Star number 3 is the red coin star. After the main segment, we previously went right to the magic carpets, but if we instead went straight across, we'd get to the red coin challenge. This is a very focused challenge. Cartwheels, wall jumps, backflips and whatnot. I see it as an easy challenge now, but I imagine most people struggled with it the first time. I think for a long time this was the only star I was able to grab in this stage though, because it was just easier to make it to this area than to head across the magic carpets. There's a specific section behind the red coin challenge that has basically the ultimate wall kick test for a player to undergo. You'll actually have to master it because the pink Bob-omb sits on top of that wall and you need to activate that cannon for the 6th star. So the hope here is that a player will use the wall kick to get up to the top and be able to drop down for a red coin, otherwise they'll have to come back here again to unlock the Bob-omb. Also, the wall kicks will have to be mastered if you want to grab the 5 blue coins at the end of the challenge. And you'll definitely want to master that because between those blue coins and the red coins, this whole segment will give you 46 out of the 100 coins needed. So the difficulty of the 100 coin star is entirely contingent on the blue coin switch mixed with the wall jump. I'd like to stress that here because I'm not going to go through the 100 coin star later for this stage. If you can get the blue and red coins, it's pretty easy, and if you can't, it's pretty hard. But anyway, that's about it for the red star. It's a good challenge for the final stage and is less about the search and more about your control of Mario with these different types of leaps. Stars 4 and 5 are to the left of the center of the map. When you get across, 2 different directions with different types of challenges will lead to each star, but for the most part those challenges will involve some form of falling platforms and tight maneuvering to overcome. For star 4 you have to time some jumps off a swinging platform to make it to the star, and for star 5 you have to go through a quick speed test as you flatten some triangles and quickly platform your way through the challenge in hopes that you can get to the star at the end of the test. Both stars do have a bit of difficulty with the narrow challenges, and both stars could very well lead to Mario falling down below. A lot. It's in my opinion a worthy difficult challenge for an endgame though. And finally, the 6th star will be a cannon shot. The cannon is on the same ship as the 1st star. You might not even realize it's there until you speak to the pink Bob-omb, so hopefully you figured that out when you're doing the red coin star. But this means that you have to go through all of the magic carpet rides again and close it off with the perfect cannon shot to receive your final star in the final stage of this game. Star number 105. Prior to this stage, I concluded that 22 of the previous 98 stars were redundant because they sent you back to the hub world when you collected them. So let's see where we end up now. Star number 1 is on the ship. There is no benefit of remaining on that ship unless a player has prepared the cannon for star number 6 already. But since the game can't possibly know if a player has done that, I think it's in the player's best interest to be sent back to the beginning of the stage because more than likely, they wouldn't have prepared the cannon for star 6 yet. So although the 2 stars are in the same location, and on a repeat playthrough this could be seen as a redundant task, I can't give it a strike because most players wouldn't know to unlock the cannon prior to heading to the ship on a first go around. Also, I gotta imagine between star 1 and star 6, you'll have gotten a lot better riding the magic carpet, so you might notice a difference in how easy it was to get to the ship. Star number 2 sits atop the big house in the sky, and there's literally no benefit of remaining there after the star is collected. Sure, there is a warp in the house that'll take a player to where the red coins are, but that's not something you really figure out that easily. Star number 3 is a red coin star. I can give this one a strike. It's worse for a player to get sent back to the hub because after you pick up the 3rd star, it's much easier just to run to the center of the stage and choose to go right or left. Stars 4 and 5 are a bit tough to figure out for me. On one hand, they're in the same area as each other, even though they have different routes. But on the other hand, they are branched off from one another, and it's not that easy to jump between the two if you're not completely comfortable with controlling Mario. I'm leaning towards giving star 5 a strike because getting down from that star is probably easier than star number 4, and really I'm only giving the strike because it's actually pretty far along the stage from a time perspective, since you have to go through the magic carpet ride to get back to the area. And I'm not giving a strike to star number 6 because there's really no benefit of starting the stage from all the way up there. Again, as a final reminder, the point of me keeping track of all of these redundancies is to figure out how terrible it is that the game sends players back to the start of the stage. It's not to analyze if collecting a specific star is redundant because you have to head through the same path. As I've been discussing all throughout this retrospective, redoing paths is in essence part of the full completion of any platformer. This isn't Breath of the Wild, this isn't even Mario Odyssey. There are a lot more set routes that a player is meant to go through, and going through them multiple times allows a player to get better at traversal, take alternate routes, discover hidden secrets, and shortcuts, and whatnot. This has been a common point of platformers since the dawn of time, and that goes double when those platformers have MacGuffins to collect. I don't think it's redundant to go through a linear path over and over again because I think each time I go through those paths, I learn something new. I get better at the game, and ultimately, at the end of each of those sections, I have a new objective. I'm not repeating the same stars over and over again. I'm just redoing a lot of what happens in the beginning of the stage, and I don't think that's fundamentally an issue. I'll apply the same logic from Star Fox 64. You'll redo the opening stage over and over again with every playthrough, and there really isn't more than a handful of alternate routes you can take. But I'm not going to define my entire start-to-end playthrough of that game based on the first stage alone. It's all about the entire journey I took to get from the start to end. So even if I go through the game 10 times, and there are repeated segments at the beginning, middle, or end of the playthrough, each playthrough is still unique to its own extent. That's how I feel about Rainbow Ride, Tick-Tock Clock, Tall Mountain, and any pairs of stars in this game that are in the same area. If Mario 64 gave you a map, and that map asked you to collect every single star, then I can see why being sent back to the start would be an issue. Imagine playing Odyssey and grabbing a star and knowing that the other star is right next to you, only to be sent back to the start of the stage. That would be obnoxious. But in the case of Mario 64, every star is a new challenge. And while you have a hint that could point you in the right direction, you sort of have to figure it out for yourself. That's part of the design of the game. Like I've previously said, this game is not just a collectathon. It's a platformer too. Each of these stars are not just MacGuffins, they're objectives. And the route you take to those objectives can and will converge at many points. But it's still a specified route unique to that star. Unique to you as a player. You can say it's a chore to return to. Fine, but that's not relevant to my discussion. I'd have to do another 14-part series to figure out exactly how many, but a good amount of the stars in this game would still be better to send you back to the start, even if you knew exactly where they were. On a general casual first or second time playthrough, I've concluded that 24 of the 105 stars in this game are redundant because they sent you back to the start. 15 of those 24 are spread pretty equally across 4 stages, with the remaining sprinkled throughout the other 11. 4 stages is not even 1/3 of the game. And even within those stages, it's only half of those stages. Jolly Roger Bay only got as many strikes as it did because of how slow the swimming was and how vast the ocean was. If someone enjoys the swimming and loves the stage and loves exploring in there, the strikes might not even apply to them. And Hazy Maze Cave is a frickin' maze, so of course it's gonna get all those strikes. But it's going to drive someone mad regardless of how you start each mission. But still, in total, Out of the 105 missions in these stages, 24 stars is like 1 in 5 if you're rounding. Heck, you could even remove the 100 coin missions and say that 24 out of 90 is just barely 1 in 4. I'm not going to go through the hypotheticals of a repeat playthrough or someone using a guide, but I'd be willing to guess that even then, at most, that number doubles. And I think I'm being generous in saying that. Ultimately, the whole point when I started this retrospective was to shed some light on this modern criticism. I call it a modern criticism not because it's recent, but because it's a reflection of how modern games play onto games of the past, in an attempt to justify shrugging them off as outdated and no longer enjoyable. And not only do I think I have empirical evidence that proves that the Mario 64 experience is not nearly as outdated and not with the times as some people are making it out to be, primarily because of the redundancy of being sent out to the hub world, but I think I've also tried my best to stress that you can't judge these games with the same values. Mario 64 is not a modern day collectathon. It's a collectathon that was designed around a player starting a stage to undergo a specific objective. Applying modern rules to those objectives would actually make the game worse for all but 24 stars in the game. Not 24 out of 90, not even 24 out of 105, 24 out of 120. But hey, we'll reconvene at the conclusion. Next, we have to quickly run through the 15 secret stars sprinkled around Peach's castle. Peach's Castle's secret stars are quite frankly not at all as secretive as I'd have liked, but they still offer an extra fun challenge as effectively an eighth of the star count in Mario 64. We're in the final stretch now, 105 stars later, and we can finally run through the remaining stars to get to full completion. I genuinely thought this would be a short 5-minute segment, but I forgot how much I like to ramble on and go into barely relevant specifics. I've already done a deep dive into the hub world and the intricate little details of how a player learns to advance through Peach's Castle, so I'm going to assume you remember everything I said during that segment as I move forward. If you don't, well, just go back and watch it after this. I won't be throwing in a pop quiz or anything, so you don't have to have everything I mentioned previously memorized. I'm going to go through these stars in an order that makes sense to me rather than how they're listed. After a player gets their first star, there are 2 doors they can enter in the castle. The first one obviously leads to Whomp's fortress, but there's the second one upstairs in the corner that leads to a room with 3 Princess Peach paintings. I always assumed these were stained glass windows, but I'm not sure what is right or wrong anymore after reading people's comments throughout this retrospective. Either way, there are 3 of these paintings surrounding you, and the hope is you, as a player, will interact with the paintings until you accidentally fall into one. Up pops the first secret slide in the game. This was such a cool discovery for me, and I'm assuming for many people. The whole application of slides in Mario 64 was such a bizarre inclusion. Like today we just look back at it like, oh yeah, there were slides in Mario 64, that was a thing. But it's so out of place. And still, I'm really glad the slides were included. They're a lot of fun, and the music during these bonuses make it all the better. Get through this fairly simple challenge though, and you have 106 stars. Star 107 is the secret aquarium. You'll notice 2 obscure holes up high in the wall when you enter the room for Jolly Roger Bay. One of them will grant you a 1-up, and the other will take you to a bonus room. You also need to pull off a higher jump to reach those holes, which is a good early game challenge to get a player to reach a location that a regular jump can't get to. The challenge inside is pretty easy. You just need to swim around and grab the 8 red coins before you drown. Well, it's easy once you get used to the swimming controls, but I've seen people complain about how finicky it is in Mario 64. People like me. But the space is so small that I hardly find it worth complaining about, even if the swimming isn't as intuitive. Funnily enough, I had a whole revelation about my hatred for water levels from the N64 area, and how it was all because of Jolly Roger Bay. But between Dire Dire Docks, Wet Dry World, and now this bonus room, I realized I didn't even hate all the water segments in this game. Although in fairness, Dire Dire Docks is super small and straightforward, this bonus room is even smaller, and Wet Dry World is as much as non-water level as it is water. Actually, it might even be more of a non-water level in general. Star number 108 is a simple discussion with Toad outside of Hazy Maze Cave. I haven't mentioned the toads and sides throughout the games yet, but basically they will help guide you. The reason I didn't mention them is because I never really used them as a kid. All of the moments throughout this retrospective where I mention a player will learn to do something by running into a wall and seeing it ripple, or jumping into a painting from a different height by accident in the case of Wet Dry World, or just all of the other stuff I praise in the stage developers for guiding a player without putting a text box. Well, those toads and signs are the text boxes in case you ever do need a hand. They'll tell you when the door to the upstairs is not unlocked that your key might need to be used in the basement. They'll throw up a sign next to the pillars that drain the moat around the castle to ground pound. There actually is a lot of guidance in text throughout this game, But quite frankly, I don't remember any of it, nor do I recall leaning on any of it to figure out the secrets of this game, because I think the game was designed in a manner that would guide most players through 99% of it without needing to view these texts throughout. And I think most people figured out these intricate details of the game without the toads. Like, one toad will mention if you lose your cap in a stage to go back into that stage and get your cap back. But I think most players would have figured that out without speaking to that toad. But in case they don't, that toad is there to help them out. And there's an incentive to speak to all the toads too, because you'll eventually figure out that they'll give you stars. And that'll just force you to seek out and speak to every one of them in the game, and help you uncover more and more secrets throughout that you may have not picked up on yet. The toads specifically that you speak to that give you stars will also guide you towards something pretty important in the game. This one, for example, hints that there are worlds inside the walls, which is meant to help push you towards the entrance of Shifting Sandland. Star 109 is another toad star. This one will provide you with a hint that if you notice anything in the mirror room not reflecting, then you should investigate, which is this game's way of hinting you towards the Snowman's Land entrance. So again, they tie the entrance of a hidden stage with a star-wielding toad because they know a player will have to speak to that toad at some point, and it amplifies its importance. Star 110 is the final toad power star. It's outside of Tick-Tock clock. And you guessed it, it'll provide you with a hint to watch the big hand on the clock before entering the stage. Star 111 is the MIP star. At 15 stars, if you head downstairs, MIPs will be running away. You'll have to work on your quick reaction skills in close quarters and be able to dive and grab MIPs. As I mentioned previously, MIPs was also a good means of guiding players to the hidden wall of Shifting Sandland because a player will likely run into said wall after chasing it. Star 112 is another MIP star. This time it'll appear when a player has 50 stars. To get star 113, you have to go through the slide again, and this time you have to complete it in under 21 seconds. From my understanding, the game developers meant to make it so that this was supposed to be done in under 20 seconds, but they somehow screwed that up? I don't remember where I read that, but I remember it being a thing. Either way, in order to get down there quick enough, you'll need to hold up on the joystick to have more speed. You'll also have to be very careful to not bump into any walls to keep the momentum. It was very challenging back in the day, even though right now I have to intentionally slow down so that I can get the timer above 21 seconds and get the first star. That being said, this is pretty obscure. It's not really that easy to figure out that the slide has 2 stars. This one is an actual secret star. Quite frankly, the only true secret star. I am fairly confident that this was the last secret star I ever collected, and it might have even been star number 120 for me. The only hint provided is a sign in the actual slide stage that mentions if you slide really fast, you'll win a star. But for most players, they probably just assume that the first star they grabbed is the one that the sign was talking about. I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if I figured this one out simply by trying to beat a personal record to get down there fast enough for laughs. None of the secret stars before or after this one are remotely as obscure. But either way, it's a fun extra challenge to reward players who repeat the slide challenge to try and break their own records. Star 114 is the Red Winged Cap Star. When you have 10 power stars, a bright light will shine down on the sun rug in the middle of the castle. You're meant to use your better judgment and stare into the bright white light. I always thought this was kind of hilarious, since you end up in the sky after that, because it used to remind me of the whole don't head towards the light thing to avoid death, and then all of a sudden Mario has wings like an angel in heavenly space. But anyway, for the longest time, I couldn't get the 8 red coins here. I say longest time, but what I really mean is between the ages of 6 and 7. I struggled. I think I used to always nosedive into the red switch and try to use the cannon to grab the coins, but it wasn't possible. Eventually I figured out you're supposed to immediately steer to the right and not try any crazy maneuvers. It's all about the tight and slow control to get the 8 red coins. Hit the red switch, pick up the star, and move on. Star 115 is hidden inside Hazy May's cave in the room where the green cap is unlocked. You gotta get into the cavern and head to Dory and have her drop you off near the double doors in the back of the cavern. After that, it's a quick maneuver through a short path and a new pile of goop to jump into, similar to the one you jumped into to enter Hazy May's cave. You'll need to use a combination of Metal Mario and simple to mildly challenging platforming maneuvers in order to collect the 8 red coins, as well as unlock the metal cap. Also, I haven't really mentioned it at all yet, but there are a lot of stages or bonus areas that'll send you back to the castle grounds in this game if you fail. This is one of them. I kinda hate these things. I'm guessing how I feel towards these forced castle exits are like what others feel towards the forced stage exits after collecting a star. But this is much worse. Even if I actually used to think these castle exits were very interesting and were a nice way to connect everything together in the game. Star 116 is the Vanish Cap bonus room. This one is a lot of fun because it is a bit more challenging than the other cap stars. You go down a giant slide and must aim your drops downwards to the right location so you can grab the red coins on the landings. After that, you have a good amount of fun with some skill-based platforming. Going through this area is not only a fun challenge because of the red coins, even if you avoid the red coins altogether, you'll still have to carefully maneuver through the obstacle course. but trying to get the red coins does add an extra challenge and turns this from a 7 out of 10 stage to a 10 out of 10 stage for me. I really appreciate this bonus area, especially considering it's an early game platforming challenge and can provide a quick bit of struggle for even returning players. In many ways, I view the stage as a 2D transition to 3D stage because it has the feel of an over-the-shoulder classic level. But I'll get a bit deeper into that shortly when we go through the Bowser courses. Star 117 is a tough one. It's a significantly more advanced version of the Red Cap Star stage. There are rainbows and clouds and cannons all around, and Mario has to blast off and collect 8 red coins. There is an element of problem solving in addition to the requirement of comfortably controlling Mario in flight. You'll have to know how to utilize poles and cannons to reach all of the red coins. It's definitely a fun one, for me at least, but it is frustrating that a loss here will take you back to the castle grounds because that's a very long journey back up to the top of the castle. Also, I like that the entrance to this stage sits opposite to Rainbow Ride. It makes it feel just as important as that stage and Tick-Tock Clock when it comes to the final stage difficulty spikes, because that's in effect what this is. Star 118 is the stage of the first Bowser battle. So first off, these Bowser stages are basically what I think this game would have been if Nintendo decided to go straight into the 3D land / world approach rather than open world collectathons. Perhaps this is what all of the stages would have looked like if the developers weren't limited on memory during development, and you'd just have 100 of these rather than open worlds with 7 objectives each. I've discussed the linear courses in depth already, but those stages are mostly made linear by having some form of an upwards trajectory that you're meant to climb. The linearity there is hidden in what is disguised as a vertical open world stage. On the other hand, the Bowser stages are almost what you'd get if you turned a 2D Mario stage to be behind Mario's back a la Super Paper Mario. Obviously, the aesthetic isn't there, but this is a pure platforming challenge and an homage to the 2D games, made even more symbolic by ending off with a Bowser fight and having that sinister Bowser music. Genuinely, I always viewed these stages as the developers attempting at transitioning the Bowser stages from the classics into 3D. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the design elements from these stages were initially planned for main stages in the game, but they figured the design itself would be antithetical to the open sandbox theme throughout the game. Hence why the actual linear stages we got like Tall Mountain and the like were transitioned into vertical stages to keep cohesion between start and end points. Either way, the stage isn't the ultimate test, but it is a test. You'll have to comfortably get around to the end of the stage without falling off, whether due to a misplaced jump or a reaction to an enemy. There's lots of fun to be had in the Bowser stages though if you're good at controlling Mario. It makes me feel like I'm in the Mushroom Kingdom or playing a tunnel-style platformer like Crash or Sonic from the low poly era. The actual bonus star is the collection of the red coins on your way to Bowser, which again just feels like a typical collectible in a linear platform. They're hidden in some not so obscure locations that you'll have to use an extra amount of skill to get to. Not to harp, but I genuinely think these stages and their focused linear platform challenges would have made for an awesome early 3D platformer. But anyway, his fight is simple in theory. You grab his tail, rotate your joystick, and launch him into one of the explosives on the outside. In practice, well, it takes a bunch of practice to get used to. I used to do 2 or 3 short throws in a row just to get him close enough to the mine, and then it's usually pretty easy after that. I think you can also slowly mash the button and he'll keep shifting forward. It's just one of those things you have to get a grip on. He'll have a few different attacks related to fire breathing and charges. Also, you have to be careful because if you miss the mines, he'll fly back onto the stage and do more damage. My dude can jump. Star 119 is Bowser in the Fire Red Sea, aka the second Bowser fight in the basement. Same idea. Linear stage. It feels like a transition from 2D to 3D. 8 red coins along your route will give you that star. The big difference here in this stage is that the lava will stop you from falling to your doom by burning your butt back onto the platform. And you can even manipulate the burns while Mario flings into the air to skip different challenges. The stage is an uptick in difficulty from the last one. The main gimmick, aside from all of the burning, is the stage expands and retracts like an accordion vertically, so you'll have to work with the stage as you make your way upwards. And just like the stage, the boss fight is also an uptick in difficulty. It's almost the same fight, but Bowser will also jump on the edge of the platform and really mess with your depth perception. I always liked how epic it looked when he did that too. Really added some oomph to the visuals. I also thought it was really cool that if you fall off the stage, Mario still technically bounces around and burns until his health is all gone. You're doing this battle over an ocean of lava, even though you can't escape it if you fall down. Either way, the fight more or less plays out the same way, minus Bowser's few extra attacks and the red backdrop. Hit a mine, and Bowser's done for. And that takes us straight to star number 120, Bowser in the Sky, specifically the 8 red coins. This one takes all of the difficulty from the first 2 stages and just amps it up. Red coins are in even more difficult areas to reach. There are a lot more ways to fall, a lot more enemies to ruin your day, and a lot more ways that a player will have to start the red coin collection all over again. It's the ultimate linear test in the game. And again, the red coins along the path are no different than the random MacGuffins you'd have to collect in any of the 2D games or 3D Land and World. Except this whole thing is a lot less forgiving because you have to grab all of these collectibles in a single life. There is a lifeline. A single 1-up sits outside of the Bowser fight, which effectively allows players unlimited lives for this challenging fight. And kudos to the devs for that, because this fight will most certainly cause at least one game over otherwise. And to ramp up the difficulty, Bowser will take 3 hits this time. He'll have more attacks, and he'll have body paint left over from the rave he attended. But the actual hard part of this is that he removes the segments of the stage that lead up to the mines. And oh man, did they get me with this one. I hated them for it. Like, the only way a kid could cheese the previous fights was to go for the slow and steady short throws. But just like with so many other moments in this game, you eventually have to get to a point along the adventure where you have to learn how to master an aspect of the game if you want to move forward. The same way you had to master the running, the platforming, the swimming, the wall kicks, the puzzles, the exploration, the surfing, the surviving, the pole jumping, the obscure stage entrances, more puzzles, more platforms, more exploration, more determination, and more mastering. You have to do what the game demands of you. Spin those damn joysticks, time those damn A presses, and so longe the hell out of Bowser. Age ain't nothing but a number, and that number is Mario 64. I don't know what that means, but I thought it would be a catchy sentence to start off this final segment. For many reasons, most of which have already come up during this retrospective, there is a common belief that Mario 64 has not exactly aged well. As a final homage to this game, basically my favorite game of all time, I want to address that claim and try and hopefully make it clear why I don't agree with that sentiment. I do want to make it clear though, I do believe this game has aged, and I'm not even remotely trying to pretend it hasn't. I mean, look at it. Truly a product of its time. But I don't think the game is so outdated that it can't be enjoyed through the lens of a modern gamer. First, I'll immediately address the controls, and by that I mean both Mario and the camera. The controls in this game are obviously not perfect. I'd even go as far as to say they weren't perfect for the time either. They obviously get a pass since this game was basically the first of its kind, but that's not relevant to my discussion. The ultimate proof for me that the controls for this game are not perfect is the decades of complaints people have made towards the endgame. And I'm not strictly talking about Rainbow Ride and Tick-Tock Clock either. Many earlier stars get left for the endgame too because of controls like the Red Coin Collection and Hazy Maze Cave, for example. In my opinion, if Mario 64's controls were actually perfect, then the fandom wouldn't have hated those stages nearly as much as they did, because I think it's the controls that makes them hate those stages. I don't think Tick-Tock Clock and Tall Tall Mountain and the like are hated strictly because they're linear. It's because of all those easy ways you fell to your death because Mario didn't quite do what you wanted him to do in those moments with death looming. As I've alluded to through this whole retrospective, the game spends so much time teaching you how to control Mario because they know there's a learning curve. But the reality is there is just so much of the game that can be accomplished without going through the learning curve that players might not even have to figure out how to do anything more than the long jumps and backflips. Stars can be skipped, warps can be used, shortcuts can be taken, etc. A player could basically make their way with only doing a handful of truly difficult stars that require perfect control of Mario, and then if, and only if, they decided to go for 120, that's when they'll have to actually undergo many of the challenges they skipped. But again, revisiting those star objectives will only teach them to control Mario if they still haven't figured out how to cheese the objectives while exploring the stage for easier stars. So even a player that gets to 120 might end up fumbling their way through it without gaining mastery of Mario's controls. The reason I'm getting as deep into this as I can is because a general pattern I've learned is that people that figured out how to control Mario often find these endgame stages to be a lot more enjoyable, and sometimes they're even a favorite. At least, that's the observation I've made with my own experience, the experiences of my friends and family, and hundreds of different Mario 64 videos that I've watched over the past decade or two. I think the enjoyment of Mario 64's linear, tight-spaced challenges is explicitly tied to whether or not a player is willing to take the time to learn how to control Mario in those environments. And really, I think that's as simple as getting used to stopping Mario in place prior to turning, as well as learning to master the trajectory of the cartwheel and relying more on that. I think most players that actually run through the game and enjoy the exploration and the safer, risk-free platforming segments are like 90% of the way there too, because they learn how to do everything else except control Mario in those riskier situations. And going that extra 10% would probably make them enjoy a lot more challenges in this game that they initially deemed impossible. But I'm just theorizing at this point. Basically, I'm saying all of this to highlight that I, someone who always thought that Mario 64 was basically the perfect implementation of Mario's controls and could never imagine people criticizing how flawless that control is, accept that the controls are not perfect. Because if they were, they wouldn't need the adjustments that I just went through. Also, now that we have more 3D Mario games, it's pretty clear what a perfect Mario control should feel like. Despite that, while I don't think Mario's control, or especially the camera control, are perfect, I also don't think it's so terrible that it can't be something a player gets used to. I'd say if you're just someone looking to beat the game through the third Bowser, there's almost no adjustment necessary. You can pick up the controller, and as long as you've played a Mario game or any 3D platformer before, you're basically going to need like 10 minutes to get used to the mechanics and physics, and that's it. You'll improve over time, but even the starting point is more viable for modern gamers. If you're someone looking for full completion, however, that's when I could yield that the controls kinda stink. Again, this is in regards to both the abhorrent camera moments as well as the actual control of Mario. But I don't think the controls aged bad. They were technically already this bad based off my observation of how people feel about linear stages that I just went through. All of this is to say that when it comes to the controls of this game, I think you could find a gargantuan amount of games that didn't age well from that era that would be much better examples. Mario 64's controls and cameras aren't an age issue, they're an adjustment issue. And I know that sounds like semantics, but there are millions of people over the past almost 3 decades that thought and might still think that the game controlled flawlessly. And I have a hard time believing they're all blinded by nostalgia. Heck, there are even people that played Mario 64 for the first time with a Wii U Pro controller as kids that don't criticize the controls. And Mario 64 objectively felt better with a Nintendo 64 analog stick, so that means something. In any case, while yes, the controls aren't what many would consider to be modern, I'm a firm believer that they're hardly so archaic that they can be easily to semi-easily adapted to for modern gamers. Next one is obviously the visuals. Okay, they're ugly, low-poly visuals that have the N64 charm that I personally love but many will scoff at. Most people sort of agree that 3D games didn't start to look good until we hit the GameCube era, and I can completely understand that sentiment. The Nintendo 64 is to 3D visuals what the NES was to 2D visuals. It's got a charm to it, but that's about it. This segment is obviously not one that I can claim with a straight face hasn't aged, but there are plenty of Nintendo 64 games that I can go back to, even on a CRT, and wonder how on earth I was even able to tell the difference between various models on screen. So while the visuals have obviously aged, I think they've aged a lot better than many games from that era, which is funny because almost all of them came after Mario 64. And I genuinely wonder if the reason Mario 64 aged better is because they didn't get too detailed with many of the designs and kept it simple, whereas the more ambitious titles from that era overdid it and suffered as a result. I'm not quite sure, but that being said, the visuals and atmosphere and ambiance all did a phenomenal job. Every stage immerses you. There's a certain aura. Okay, let's get this out of the way. Guys, I'm the last person to discuss all the weird visuals, memories, Mandela effects, personalizations, negative auras, and all that other stuff that the fanbase has been going through since the COVID days. I thought it was a meme, but no, there's a whole lot of you that fall in line with it. The game is scary and lifeless and gave you all nightmares, I guess? Every time I mention a good atmosphere, or a sinister environment, or a serious tone, someone pops up and says something that sounds ripped straight out of a 1980s mental thriller flick, and mentions icebergs. I don't know. I guess to each their own. I always just thought the ambiance was good and enjoyed the low poly charm, and that was enough. If y'all want to take these discussions and run with them, then you do you. I'm only glossing over this stuff because that's all anyone keeps pointing out in the comments. Next up is the music. I love pretty much every tune in this game, and I think they, for the most part, complement the stages they play in. There are obviously not enough tracks though, and considering there are only 15 stages, I feel like they could have figured that out. But I'm not a game developer or a composer. Either way, the music is all iconic and I can listen to it for hours, but I also kind of want to address a bit of an observation to the music. As I was going through this whole process, I started to make many connections between stages, primarily between stages on the main floor and upstairs like I mentioned in some of my earlier segments. And I actually think I was onto something, or I should say 10-year-old me was onto something, because that's when I first kind of started thinking about this. The stages in this game are for the most part made in pairs, with a single exception. And it's not just about the music, but that is an obvious portion of it. Keep in mind, a lot of this is just a theory, and I have no proof to back it, but this is just kind of how I viewed it when I was younger. Many people would assume Bob-omb Battlefield and Whomp's Fortress are a pair because of the music, but that wouldn't be correct in my opinion. The stage design elements differ too much for that to be the case. Bob-omb Battlefield is a giant open area with a single peak, whereas Whomp's Fortress is a vertical stage that has a more linear traversal. The stages upstairs make a much better match. Tiny Huge Island not only shares the music with Bob-omb Battlefield, but it also shares the aesthetic and the level type. It's a wide open sandbox with a peak in there that players can climb. In many ways, it's a harder version of the battlefield, including the second race with Koopa the Quick. Likewise, Tall Mountain shares the music and tone of Whomp's Fortress, but also it somewhat mirrors the stage design layout. In my opinion, it does to Whomp's Fortress what Tiny Huge Island did to Bob-omb's Battlefield. These 4 stages all share a tune, and they're the only 4 stages that have this tune. I think the game basically needed one more song, and the duology of these stages would be a lot more clear. Because instead of people seeing it as them reusing the song from Battlefield over and over again, people would have just said every tune gets used twice. There are 2 snow-themed stages, and they share the same tune. There are 3 water stages, and 2 of them share the same tune. At first, I thought Jolly Roger Bay and Wet Dry World were meant to be sister stages, since the other 3 stages on the first floor had sister stages on the third floor. But then I realized not only does Dire Dire Docks have the same music, it actually is more of the same type of water level as Jolly Roger Bay than Wet Dry World. And Wet Dry World clearly has the same vibe as Hazy Maze Cave, and many of the same absurd nightmares people get because of their backgrounds or whatever, as well as the same music, and they're both stages built around maze-like puzzle-solving assets. They're clearly sister stages here. The first 2 truly open square sandbox stages a player will enter are Shifting Sandland and Lethal Lava Land, and go figure, they have the same tunes as well. And also both have a central gimmick involving the entry into the volcano and pyramid. And finally, the 2 remaining courses are both ridiculously linear, require tight space control of Mario, and are the hardest pair of stages in the game, and also share the same music. This game is basically made up of 7 pairs of stages that share tunes with one another, and 2 of the pairs have the same song for some inexplicable reason. While Big Boo's Haunt is the standout here and doesn't get a partner. But to be fair, there are no stages in the game that are even remotely similar to what's going on in Big Boo's Haunt, so it makes sense it doesn't share a song with any other stage. Anyway, yeah, I just thought this was a fun observation. It seems to me like these stages come in pairs, and that's how the music tracks were determined for the stages. And if there was one more track that was used for Whomp's Fortress and Tall Mountain, that would have probably been a lot more clear for everyone. Or this might just be a reach. Either way, the music or lack of additional tracks aren't a massive outdated concept that doesn't occur in modern games. Many modern open world games have the same track play over and over again in the main area that takes up 75% of the game. So at least here it's a bit more distributed. Plus some of the tunes here are still in line with the most iconic in the series. Aside from that, you have the stage design. I already went in depth on all these stages, but basically you have linear stages, puzzle solving stages, and open sandbox stages. Every stage has a little bit of all of these aspects, but usually 1 or 2 of them stick out more than others. Or in the case of Bob-omb Battlefield, they threw all of it in there to really get a player introduced to the game. Seriously, it's a giant open sandbox with a linear path up through the summit with a whole island in the sky puzzle. A really good introduction to all of the different types of stages you'll face later. But anyway, I think the game did a great job with the variety of missions and managed to not make too much of the game feel overly repetitive. Even though every stage had 100 coin collections and red coin challenges, they never felt like the same star because the stages varied enough in aesthetic and placement of the coins, as well as a uniqueness in design and challenges. There are many stars in this game that feel simply like a direct A to B type star. Some of them are in linear stages like Tick Tock Clock, but some of them are in sandbox stages with no bottomless pits at all like Snowman's Land. These star objectives in these stages are implemented in a manner that will naturally guide a player along a specific path. They're very much stars that I firmly believe would take place in a 64 version of Mario 3D World, and they're well spread out throughout the game. And likewise, you have many stars that will reward curious players for exploring every nook and cranny with nothing but a simple hint. So a player may be tasked with going through linear paths or puzzle solving or exploring stages that are either sandboxes, linearly built, or mazes, all while using their exploration and problem solving skills as if they were strictly open Mario Odyssey style stages. The observation I've made here is that the stage design, as well as the specific star objectives, not only vary quite a bit, but they're mixed and matched throughout the various environments that allow for different types of challenges to make these stages unique. It's something that I don't think this game gets quite enough credit for. People will just shrug off Tick-Tock Clock for its linearity, but there's also a whole puzzle and exploration challenge related to riding the clock hands, or heck, it's a linear stage with one of the most unique puzzles strictly for entering the clock. Or even in an earlier example like the brick wall in Whomp's Fortress. I think the diversity of all these different objectives, as well as my empirical analysis of the stages in the previous segments, is important to note when someone considers the gameplay of Mario 64 outdated. The game is somewhat punishing a player for removing them from the stage for only 24 out of 120 stars. In all other cases, it's the end of the objective, an accomplishment of a task, and a chance to start fresh in the same stage or head on to a new one. I don't think new players even felt frustrated by this design element. It's mostly repeat players that are complaining about it. Because when you're actually running through the game, the exit and entry feels natural since you haven't completely memorized the maps. Now obviously there are a lot of quality of life improvements that are in more recent games like maps and unlimited lives and whatnot, but ultimately I think the stage design and the general flow of the gameplay as you go through this game is not only not outdated, it lives up to some of the best modern day 3D platformers. Basically what I'm trying to say is that I don't think this game hasn't aged well. I think it's aged as much as it's expected to age. And anybody that put in an effort to learn all of the fancy maneuvers in Odyssey could put a fraction of that effort to master Mario moveset in 64. The stages, the music, the aesthetics, the challenges, and just the overall experience of the game from start to end is still very much something that anybody between the ages of 5 and 50 could pick up and fall in love with. And again, I know this because even until now, there are more and more people doing just that. This whole experience has been roughly 65,000 words of scripts. To put things into perspective, my Sonic 06 retrospective was half of that, and that was a 2.5 hour long video. I've enjoyed the heck out of this though, and I've touched up on almost everything that I've wanted to touch up on. After all, this is my favorite game of all time, and I only really get to cover it once. So you can be damn sure I'm going to say everything I want to say. And it's very fitting that this retrospective has gotten more traction than anything else I've ever worked on since starting this channel. I'm really happy I did this. My scripts were written without even playing the game. I have a bunch of stock footage from old playthroughs, and some family members and friends helped out with that too. But I was literally able to get through each stage and write out the script based off memorization. That's how much I love this game. I imagine many of you could do the same thing too, and this is probably one of the few games in the world that so many people would be able to do that for. I didn't discuss all of the mods, the game breaks, the speedrunning and whatnot because I'm not versed enough in those communities. I've always just observed them from afar, but I've always admired the passion those communities have towards the game. Those are people that have way more passion for this game than I do, which is crazy for me to think of because I can't imagine someone having more passion for Mario 64 than I. And finally, before I close off, there are just a couple things I need to get out of the way so I can move on. First, this one's kind of obvious, but when I did my Mario vs. Sonic series back when this channel was at less than 300 subscribers, I told everyone back then that I'd eventually do a Mario 64 vs. Sonic Adventure video. Well, both my Sonic Adventure video and my Mario 64 vids were long as hell, and I didn't really do a head-to-head comparison in the same way that I did the classics. I obviously like Mario 64 more than Adventure, that's probably clear to most of you. 64 is my favorite game of all time after all. But I've always said that I like Sonic Adventure 2 more than Mario Sunshine. And finally, the last thing I'd like to do is to rank these stages. I've been thinking about it quite a bit, and I'm not sure which stage is my favorite, so let's try and figure that out together. Let's go in order. Bob-omb Battlefield is below Whomp's Fortress. Jolly Roger Bay is in last. Cool Cool Mountain is above all three of those. Big Boo's Haunt sits just below Cool Cool Mountain. Hazy Maze Cave is probably tied with Bob-omb Battlefield for me. Lethal Lava Land sits with both of those. Shifting Sandland is about tied with Whomp's Fortress. Dire Dire Docks sits below Lethal Lava Land. Snowman's Land is just about the same as Dire Dire Docks. Wet Dry World, I'm gonna throw straight into the top with Tall Tall Mountain. Tiny Huge Island sits with Cool Cool Mountain. Tick-Tock Clock sits right up there with the others in first. And Rainbow Ride sits with Tiny Huge and Cool Cool Mountain. So you have S rank, Tick-Tock Clock, Tall Tall Mountain, Wet Dry World. A rank, Tiny Huge Island, Cool Cool Mountain, and Rainbow Ride. B rank, Whomp's Fortress, Shifting Sandland, and Big Boo's Haunt. C rank, Bob-omb Battlefield, Hazy Maze Cave, Lethal Lava Land. D, Snowman's Land, Dire Docks, and E, Jolly Roger Bay. Funnily enough, I like everything from D tier and upwards, but I think visually laying them out like this in a tier list makes it easier to look at. The only stage I actually don't like is Jolly Roger Bay. Everything else is good, but obviously the higher you go, the more I like it. I'm leaning towards Tick-Tock Log being my favorite stage for its linearity, Wet Dry World being my favorite stage for its exploration, and Tall Tall Mountain being my favorite stage for its combination of both. I don't know that I can pick a single stage from those three, but this is good enough for me. Anyway, I think I've said enough. Thank you all so much for joining me along this journey. Spend a lot of time with your loved ones or doing what you love. Check back here at 11 a.m. Eastern Time.